How's it going, Jackson?
I'm doing okay. I have a bit of a sore throat. Other than that, I'm fine. How are you?
No worries. I'm doing okay. I'm taking my day off because I had to go to a board meeting, but I'm happy. I'm happy to be here.
Cool. What do you want to talk about? Because I feel like we could talk about. You see, I used to have this mindset because I'm new to debating. Vaush was my first debate, so I was
By
like,
the way, I can't
I was
see
like,
you. By
my
the way,
first debate, I was like, I only want to debate like actual fucking big fish. Hence why I was like, who the fuck is Dylanburns? I'm not gonna waste my time on this little shitlib that is an imperialist. I'm not gonna waste my time on this shit. So now I have you here because I've changed my strategy. I'm gonna literally run through all of you. I'm gonna run through all of you one by one. So you're the first one on the chopping block
hard
here
for you
tonight.
to run through me. I
It's
can't
good to
see
have
you.
you here. So what do you want to talk about?
I can't see you, Jackson. All I see is gray.
Tune onto my Twitch stream. You're not gonna see me on Discord. I'm streaming right now.
Okay, then I'll turn off. Then, okay.
What the fuck?
I'll tune into your Twitch.
Just
stream
leave
if
your
you don't know
camera
how to
on.
work
What the
Discord.
fuck are you doing? Just leave your
I thought you did. Hey, babe, if I can't see you on Discord,
what did you just call me?
I said if I didn't call you anything. I said if I can't see you on Discord, then why am I going to show myself?
Because I'm putting your face on my Twitch stream.
Ah, okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for the guest appearance. Okay, so first off, you say like a lot of things. What?
Did you say babe or did I mishear that?
I think you misheard that. You're not my type, Jackson. Sometimes if we want to hear things, we hear them.
No, everyone in my chat heard it. Go on, though. What do you want to talk about?
Okay, whatever. The first thing I wanted to talk about is your claim that I've like proposed myself to be like some foreign policy expert, right?
Bro, it says it in your bio.
What does it say in my bio?
It says you were a foreign policy advisor to a congressional candidate.
Okay. And?
That's what an expert would do. If you're advising the nation's
that's what an expert
congressional
would do. Okay.
candidates on fucking foreign policy, that's what a foreign policy expert would do. You're providing an expert analysis of foreign policy to someone who wants to sit in the halls of Congress.
Okay, so I don't like to use the word expert. I've never proposed myself to be an expert. You and Bad Empanada have both said this. People have claimed I've made this before. I've never claimed myself to be an expert. I've advised people. I'll just tell people my experience with foreign policy, and they choose sometimes that I would be useful. For example, I helped Jill Carter, state senator, when she was running for Congress, get ready for an interview about the Israel-Palestine conflict on the issue of BDS.
Would you concede that non-experts typically do not provide analysis on foreign policy to congressional candidates or to state senators?
Sometimes. I don't know. It's when people call themselves an expert, I just have a high
concede
barrier
on that point. Because I would say, yeah, like non-experts
sure.
typically don't.
I just want to make sure that
things.
It's not perpetuated that I've called myself an expert of some sort. I want other people to go to other sources to hear anything on my channel. I just want to make sure that's perpetuated, and I don't want anybody to take my word at face value.
Okay, I don't really care, but I'll abide by your terminology of being an advisor.
Okay, so want to talk about Taiwan?
I'm down to talk about Taiwan. I'm down to talk about AOC. I'm down to talk about anything.
Okay, I want to talk about Taiwan because this is the thing that everybody's been really badgering me over, right? This is the big thing. Okay, so number one, I just want to ask, do you agree with Bad Empanada that I'm gonna be like a Kissingerian type of some sort?
Bro, I don't know. I want to talk about Taiwan. I don't want to fucking talk.
Okay, then as long as you didn't make a similar claim, fine. So what's wrong with my tweet? Because that's the big thing that everybody's obsessed about. What's wrong with it?
I do not believe that we should be propping up other militaries, especially in an effort to try and wage a new Cold War against China and turn China against Taiwan. I don't think we should be doing that. And I think it's antithetical to the principles of American government to do that. Okay.
So you believe that us funding this
You elaborate on your opinion first. Because you're the one who put out the initial tweet about Hassan. What was your principal concern over Hassan's take? Because I thought it was pretty reasonable.
My principal concern is that he's using the word escalation extremely incorrectly. The idea that us sending these arms to Taiwan is an escalation, I find to be quite silly. Definitely, since this has been a policy of the United States since 1979, and that's only officially under the Taiwan Relations Act. We've been sending them aid much before that. So to consider it an escalation,
thank you, Joe,
when we're continuing a continuation of American policy is just not factually correct. It would be the status quo. It would be the perpetuation of the status quo.
So if you, well, actually, it's an increased sum of armament that we're sending, but also if you think that that's some sort of a non-escalation, then what do you think the explicit purpose of the United States providing military support in general for a sovereign entity that's trying in some ways to disassociate itself from China and become its own sovereign nation, or the United States' goal is to, you know, cut Taiwan off and away from China? What do you think the goal is of the U.S. in intervening there?
So first, about the first part of that, it is an increased sum, but a big reason why it's increased is, number one, inflation, and number two, because the defensive needs of Taiwan has increased over the years. As the Chinese military increases its capabilities.
What defensive needs? It's a part of China. The U.S. recognizes it as a part of China.
It's no, you're getting
U.S. doesn't have an embassy there. They recognize it as a part of China.
No, we do have an embassy there. We do. It's called the Taiwan. It's called the Taiwan Institute, the American Institute in Taiwan.
That's not a fucking embassy, Dylan. That's not a fucking embassy. We don't have an embassy there because it's not a sovereign country. If it was a sovereign country, we would have an embassy.
It functions. Okay.
God.
Do you want to calm down?
Do you want to have actually reasonable takes?
I want to finish my statements. You're not even letting me finish, Jackson.
It doesn't function as an embassy because it's not an embassy.
But it does function as an embassy.
No, it doesn't. If
it does everything an embassy does. Wait, can I finish? It does function. It deals with passport issues. It's what our number one negotiating and talking to of Taiwan. It functions as that. It does name one thing that an embassy does that the American Institute in Taiwan does not do.
I'm just telling you, it's not an embassy because it's not a sovereign country. So
and I'm telling you,
as such would be very, very, very disingenuous. So you would be towing the State Department line of saying that Taiwan is in its somehow own way a sovereign country. It's not.
So you are conceding that it does function as an embassy, though?
I'm not conceding anything. I'm just saying.
But you just said that it doesn't function as an embassy.
I'm saying that no, I said it's not an embassy. It's not an embassy.
Then you said that it didn't function as an embassy.
I'm saying it's not an embassy, and for that reason, you can't claim that it functions as an embassy because it's
not an embassy. But it does. Then what thing does an embassy do that the American Institute in Taiwan doesn't do? One thing, anything, literally anything. Anything in the world. One example.
It would be an embassy if it was an embassy. It's not an embassy.
That's not an answer to my question, Jackson.
It's not its own country. It doesn't have an embassy.
So it does everything that an embassy does. Just like there's another example of a Taiwanese institute of a similar nature in the United States that has basically what would be a Taiwanese ambassador that was there, for example, at Joe Biden's inauguration.
An institute, not an embassy.
Yes, it's an institute, but it does everything an embassy does.
If it was a country and if the United States recognized it as a country, then we would be calling it an embassy, correct?
We don't call it an embassy because we wanted to
because it's not a country and we don't recognize it as a country.
Why do you keep interrupting me, Jackson?
Because you keep going on these illogical paths that deviate from what the truth of the situation is.
Jackson, you got to let me finish my statements or I can't talk to you.
It's not a statement if it's a lie, but go on.
Lies can also be statements, and you haven't proven that it's a lie. It does function as an embassy. You're the one who said it didn't function as an embassy.
You're the one who said that
what does it do?
Recognize it as a part of China. You started pushing back on that.
Yeah, well, yes. Here's my statement. There's a difference between the one China policy and the one China principle, right? The Chinese government holds the one China principle. What the principle is that the mainland government, right, the PRC, is the sole governing body over mainland China, and that Taiwan is a part of China, right? But the one China policy is very similar, but the key distinction is that we don't really necessarily say that Taiwan is a part of China. We do not make that statement. It's ambiguous, just like most of our policy on Taiwan is to give us wiggle room. Even the Chinese recognize this.
The Chinese do not recognize.
No, they recognize that's our position. They recognize that that's our position. I'm not saying they recognize that Taiwan's its own separate country, but they don't pretend that we have the one China
Chinese
principle.
recognize that Taiwan is a part of their country.
Okay, that's what the Chinese
call
government
themselves the Republic of China. The U.S. doesn't have ambassadors in China. We don't have an embassy in China. It's not its own sovereign country.
Okay.
I know you want to try and spin it,
so
and we can talk about Dylan.
We can just go through all the things that make it its own country.
I just let you go on for like a minute to talk about all the dumb shit that you just put forward. So now let me talk.
Okay, Jackson.
So it doesn't have its own embassy. We don't have ambassadors there. They call themselves the Republic of China. China recognizes that it's a part of China. So I mean, you're just avoiding the principal debate that we were starting to have at the beginning of this live stream, which was, what is your excuse for saying that it's reasonable for the U.S. to give an increased supply of armament to Taiwan at this point in time when there is increased aggression towards China from the U.S. and our Western allies in a myriad of complex ways?
So first, I'm going to assert why I think it's a country. When it comes to what most countries would designate what is countries, whether you go with Webster Dictionary, any dictionary you put in front of me,
it's not a country.
Okay, you can say words. Now, can I finish?
The U.S. doesn't recognize it as a country. So are you saying that you personally recognize it as a country, or the U.S. recognizes that?
I personally recognize it as a country because not recognizing out. Wait, let me finish.
Dylanburns recognizes Taiwan as a country, but the United States doesn't. Go on.
Okay.
You can see.
Yes, I can see that because the United States doesn't recognize it as a country out of formality and trying to keep ties with the Chinese government, right? It's ridden a tightrope for a very long time, right? For example, Kissinger wanted to throw Taiwan under the bus. Many American administration wanted to throw Taiwan under the bus, and it was Congress that stepped in and stopped them on many occasions. Sometimes it was the opposite. Now, when it comes to why it's a country, it has its own functioning judiciary, it has its own military, it has its own flag, it has its own anthem, it has its own currency, it has its own identity that has formed over years, it has its own history separate from China, it is part of multiple international organizations, not all international organizations, but the United States isn't a part of, say, the International Criminal Court, even though we should be, and that doesn't make the United States not a real country, right? I don't believe that just like this isn't a country, this is a country. It's just the America gets to determine what isn't a country, and the China gets to determine what isn't a country. That's why when we didn't recognize mainland China, I still consider that a country.
So you're saying that you know more than the leaders of the U.S. government and the international community, which all define Taiwan as being a part of China.
No,
that's just your opinion. That's just your opinion. I get it. That's just your opinion. You just say that Taiwan's a country, and no one fucking agrees with you. No one in this chat agrees with you. No one on Twitch agrees with you. The U.S. government doesn't agree with you. China doesn't agree with you. The majority of people in Taiwan don't agree with you. Type a 1 in chat if you don't agree with Dylanburns here, because I don't think any of you agree with him. So Dylan, go on. Explain why the United States, in your eyes, should be providing an increased armament to Taiwan that is not its own country.
Now, number one, you're wrong again. The United States, in all function, recognizes it as a country, does not state it because they know it would piss off China. This is true of basically every other. Let me finish. They
don't recognize it as a country.
Let me go on my spiel. Just because somebody doesn't recognize it as a country does not mean it's not a country, right?
They don't recognize it as a country. It's not a country in the eyes of the United States government.
Jackson, calm down, okay?
You're the one who's getting angry.
I understand.
Because I'm debunking your point.
No, because you're interrupting me, and I'm trying to say points.
You just said that the U.S. sees it as a country.
The United States does not rule the world. I don't know if you believe China and the United States are the only two powers that dictate what it is and isn't a country, but you know what? There are nations on this planet that say it's a country and have formal embassies with it. It's not a lot, but it's changed with time because the mainland's influence has grown. Yes, we have changed with it, but we treat it in a country.
Does not have embassies. The U.S. does not have ambassadors.
We have a functional embassy in Taiwan. We have a functional ambassador.
You just said that the U.S. is one of them. We don't have an embassy there.
No, I said it's one of the. No, I said that the United States is one of the. You're not listening to me. I said it's one of those who changed its policy when it comes to embassies and national recognition officially. I was trying to tell you that it does not officially recognize it as a country. But I don't believe that just a number of nations recognizing something as a country means that it becomes a country. Definitely when the reasons they recognize it as not a country even though unofficially many have a similar policy as the United States and having private institutes act as ambassadors in all ways, act as embassies in all ways, is because they want Chinese economic power in their countries. They want the Belt and Road Initiative. They want these things, which I'm in favor of. I'm in favor of the Belt and Road Initiative. I want trade. I want international prosperity. But just because you've been strong-armed by the Chinese government to get rid of your embassy does not mean you automatically now are no longer a country. Because if that was the case, then would you agree that in 1950, the Taiwanese government was the official government of Taiwan, of China, and we should treat that as the official government of China just because less nations recognize the mainland? That would be ridiculous.
So you do realize, though, that, I mean, your preferred strategy here of like providing increased armament to Taiwan, which you claim is a sovereign country, but no one else does. And
that's not true.
And that the U.S. increase aggression towards China. You say that that's like what we should be doing, right? You say that that's a good thing, that we should be providing this increased armament, which is an increase in aggression. And if you believe that, that's obviously going to that's going to potentially one day, when the aggression reaches a certain peak level, is going to splinter potentially, if the U.S. gets its wishes, Taiwan from China. That would be the U.S.'s wishes here, right? Or at least economically splinter Taiwan from China. Now, China makes up a greater portion of trade with Taiwan than the U.S. currently does. Taiwan makes up a greater portion of trade and imports with Taiwan than the U.S. does by a great sum. So why, if you are claiming that you want to increase trade with China, you want these, I mean, I would assume this is accurate, you'd want more mutually beneficial trade agreements between countries all across the world. Why would you want this U.S. policy of increased aggression, which will only inevitably result in the splintering, at least economically, of Taiwan from China, and which will result in more harm for the people within Taiwan?
So first, I just want to say you're wrong that nobody recognizes the official government. Guatemala does, Haiti does, Honduras does, Paraguay does, Nicaragua does, Belize does. There's many countries that do. Not a ton.
What do those countries have in common?
So wait. If that's the note, if it's they all have in common, then why does the American position on it matter? If the idea of only American allies doing it, then why would the American recognition of Taiwan matter in this case?
I didn't push back on your assessed motive of the United States for not recognizing Taiwan as a sovereign country. I just said that they do not recognize Taiwan as a sovereign country. Okay,
there. Anyway, let's get to the main point again. So I do support, when it comes to China, I want to de-escalate. I agree with Joe Biden's, even though it was milquetoast speech at the UN, that they should come together kumbaya style and try to find resolutions. I didn't agree with Trump's tariffs on China. I didn't agree with that at all. But just because I want to de-escalate doesn't mean I abandon my values when it comes to Taiwan. You don't want to
de-escalate. You want the U.S. to give more arms
but it's Taiwan. Not. How is it an escalation if we're just continuing the status quo when it comes to Taiwan? Because that's what we're doing when it comes to the Taiwan Relations Act. It hasn't changed.
It's an increase in armament. And it goes hand in hand with AUKUS. It goes hand in hand with everything we're doing in the South China Sea. It goes hand in hand with all of the military placements we have surrounding China. It goes hand in hand with the economic warfare against China. You can't look at just one policy alone without assessing all of the other things that the U.S. is doing on a global scale to counter China and increase aggression against China. You can't do that.
You can ask me about those specifics, about any of those things if you want to. But right now I'm talking about this specific policy on whether we support or not support it. And when it comes to this, the Taiwan Relations Act is very clear. What?
I got a sub. I said thank you.
Okay. Congrats. So the Taiwan Relation Act is very clear that when it comes to supplying arms to Taiwan, it should be purely and only determined by their defensive needs, and we provide them weapons of a defensive character. Now, when it says that, it means its needs, whether it has to do with inflation increasing or its strategic needs. That means that the policy of it increasing some years and decreasing other years has been constant for the entirety of our relationship with Taiwan post-1979, which, by the way, was the same time that we had one of the best relationships with China, because it was the midst of the Sino-Soviet split. and they wanted to open up to the United States, and we wanted them to open up to us. And so if we've had this policy through both hard times when it comes to Chinese relations and easygoing times when it comes to Chinese relations, I don't understand how this is an escalation if it's a continuation of what we've been doing for years.
Well, I have two things. First of all, you have to look at the relationship that the United States and the leadership within, the relationship the United States had with Taiwan and the leadership within Taiwan and what they were doing to people within Taiwan during that period as well. But also, you have to assess the fact that the U.S., in my eyes, should not be providing, we shouldn't be bankrolling these countries in military aid. We shouldn't be bankrolling countries in military armament and just like completely stuffing them full of all of the military weapons that we could, squeeze out of the military industrial complex in a given year, because that country should be able to defend themselves on their own. They shouldn't have to rely on U.S. taxpayer support to wage their own alleged defensive wars, which I would argue, given the U.S. motive for escalating tensions in all the ways they are with China, this aim that the U.S. has with Taiwan is not to support any sort of defensive measures. Again, my principal concern would be the U.S.'s goal to splinter Taiwan, if not only economically, but geographically from China.
Okay, so we're moving away from the idea that it's an escalation then, and we're going on to the motives behind it then, right? Okay, so when it comes to Taiwan and these arms, you say you question whether it is defensive. So
I'm saying in general, I question the motives of the U.S. government in bankrolling countries in military armament and stuffing them chock full of military weapons, right? Because the U.S. doesn't just do that because we have a sincere care for a country's defensive operations. I mean, you have all of American or modern American foreign policy precedent to back that up.
Wait, say that last part again?
Before you definitely just heard me. I'm not going to fucking repeat myself. Just say what you're going to say.
I just wanted to hear it. I didn't hear you. Okay, whatever. If you don't want to be polite.
All of modern American U.S. foreign policy history backs up the precedent that the U.S. is not gravely concerned with the defense of any given nation or any given people. We do things so as to exert further dominance as an empire across the globe and to achieve our foreign policy goals and aims.
Okay, so I will first just say that the weapons that we're providing them, none of them are like purely offensive weapons. These are weapons that
how do you dictate that? Tell me how you dictate that. What sort of mechanisms do you have in place to dictate that?
The mechanism. Wait, you mean mechanism I have in place?
No, that the U.S. government who's providing these weapons. No. The mechanisms that the U.S. government and their relations with Taiwan have in place to control that they're not going to be used for offensive means. Tell me.
I don't have that information.
You want to know why you don't have that information, Dylan? You want to know why you don't have that information? Because the same thing was said when Biden entered office about Yemen. They said they're only going to be providing defensive weapons, missiles, and military supplies for Saudi Arabia, and it just so happens that they use them for offensive operations in Yemen.
So you have found offensive weapons that Taiwan is in control of?
I'm asking you to provide the structure
you're
that
making
is in place.
Claim. You're making the claim.
I'm asking.
You're making the claim.
I'm not making a claim. I'm not making a claim. I'm asking you to provide the structures that are in place that will guarantee that these weapons are not used for offensive operations.
I never alleged that there were structures.
You said that they were going to be used for defensive operations only. That's what you said, Dylan.
Yes.
You said they're going to be used for defensive operations.
And they are.
So tell me how they're going to be used for defensive operations.
You got to calm down if we're going to have a conversation.
Tell me how they're going to be used.
Jackson, they are going to be.
Concede that you're wrong, or tell me how they're going to be used for defensive only.
You gotta calm down, okay? You can't just be a mini Haas, okay?
Tell me.
Look.
Okay, you're not going to tell me. You concede
You're making the claim. No, I don't concede the point. You're just being anal for no reason. Because I am telling you, You would need to provide me evidence that we're providing them offensive weapons for me to be like, wow, that's terrible. We shouldn't be doing that.
Dylan.
My claim is we're giving them defensive weapons.
Your
I have
claim
checked
is
the weapons
that they're
we're giving
providing them defensive-only
weapons.
I asked you, what structures do they have in place to guarantee that, and you couldn't provide
But just
those.
because there isn't a structure in place to guarantee it doesn't mean we haven't given them defensive weapons. Are you alleging that the artillery we gave them is going to shoot over the Sea of China? They're going to shoot over from the mainland of Taiwan?
Dylan,
is that what you're alleging? Are you alleging that the F-16s we gave them are going to do bombing runs on mainland?
Dylan,
you got to show me offensive weapons if you're making the claim.
Dylan, I didn't make that claim. Tell me when I made that claim.
Tell
me the claim I made. Tell me the statement I said.
You are asking me to provide an example of structures in place to stop us from selling offensive weapons to Taiwan. And I responded, I don't know of any, but I have yet to see us sell what I would consider these purely offensive weapons to Taiwan. So please, if there is a concern about this, instead of yelling and getting your dunkaroos, I'd like to see that, because that would be very concerning to me. That'd be something I want to call my congressman
I just told you, Dylan, I just explained to you that we don't have those increased armaments in Taiwan yet. The future has not taken place yet. But what we can do is look at modern American foreign policy precedent and look at the fact that that same exact thing has happened in Yemen, where Biden said that he was only going to provide defensive weaponry for Saudi Arabia, and they go on to use them to bomb innocent Yemeni children. So what I'm saying is, unless there's a structure in place to guarantee that, then maybe we shouldn't be providing them with military armament, because this is the same fucking thing we do every time the U.S. empire engages an intervention in another country.
So you're yelling about something that has yet to occur, and I agree politicians lie sometimes, and that's bad, and I think we should immediately end
Sometimes.
Yes, politicians lie sometimes, many times, 90% of the time. We don't need to be anal over that. I'm acknowledging that Joe Biden lied. Do you want me to? What else do you need me to say?
So do you recognize the inherent flaw in a system?
No, I don't.
You don't recognize it. You see it happen in Yemen, but you don't understand how that could happen in another country.
Okay. I understand. Well, listen. If you know what, I agree. So you and me, let's go to DC and say, hey, put checks on this, official checks on this. Which both, by the way, I don't know. Have you checked if there's official checks on this or not?
No,
have you gone and checked?
Dylan.
No, I'm asking if you have.
Yeah, exactly. You're asking me a question, and I'm going to answer it.
Okay.
There might be official checks on it. There were official checks on Yemen. There were official checks on the arms that were going to Saudi Arabia as it related to offensive operations in Yemen. But the checks don't matter because there's no system in place to actually guarantee that those checks are upheld. Hence why we shouldn't just be providing armament to entities within sovereign nations that could potentially try and sow discord with those weapons.
So the interaction we just had is that you asked me a question on whether there are official checks in place to make sure they're defensive. I say I don't know because I'm trying to.
No, I didn't. No, I didn't. I said, what are the structures in place to guarantee they're not used for offensive operations?
Yes. And I tell you, I don't know. And then you go on this rant about how terrible and bad it is. And then I ask, well, do you know? And then you say, well, I don't know. So wouldn't the solution here, number one, to be go in Google and find out if this is the case, since neither of us seem to know this? And number two, if this doesn't matter to you either which way, why even talk about this for any amount of time?
Because, Dylan, my principal concern here is that the U.S. is giving an increased supply of armament to Taiwan, and there is no structure or system in place that has been put forward, as I know of, yet in any country that could guarantee that military armament isn't used for offensive operations. So regardless of whether they take the Yemen approach, the Saudi Arabian approach, and do the same thing here, it doesn't really fucking matter. Even if they did it, it would be a nice gesture, but it wouldn't really fucking matter, because at the end of the day, Taiwan's still going to use these weapons in whatever way the U.S. empire says they should use these weapons. Hence why we shouldn't be giving fucking Taiwan weapons. Don't you get it? Don't you fucking get it?
Stop. You need to calm down, okay?
No, you keep saying these delusional takes.
Yes.
How do you not understand this?
You haven't researched any of this.
Get this through your head.
Okay, Jackson. Look, okay? Is this like press TV talking points? Like, I don't like, why are you so angry about this? Okay?
Get it through your head.
You need to calm down so I can talk to you like a rational human being, okay? There's only one Haas on Twitch, okay? I don't need there to be two.
You're right. It's a fucking empire and it's crashing upon the gates of BreadTube. You are going down with these absolutely delusional takes. Say your next thing. Say your next point. Say your next point.
Am I part of BreadTube?
Say your next point. Say your next point.
BreadTube.
Say your next point. Explain why we should be giving an increased military armament to Taiwan. Okay.
So number one, what you allege that there's like basically no standard that could check this. Okay, what standard would you even have? Basically, because obviously you don't want to do this, period. But you're saying there's no standard we could even possibly have to make sure this is the case. So like, what percentage likelihood would you need to like? Would you need like 100% assurance that no one could like jilt the system? Like, what system would you put forward and that is different when it comes to checking to make sure that these weapons are defensive? I know you don't want to send them in the first place, but if you have a problem with the system in place, you got to tell me what system would you like in its place if that was the case, if that's one of your problems with it.
No, I don't want to send them at all. I'm just saying I'm just debunking your bullshit argument that these are only going to be used for defensive operations. I don't want them sent at all.
But they are, and you have no evidence otherwise. You can just say, well, let's look at Yemen, looks at there. Okay, but this is the Pacific. The strategy for Yemen is that the United States wants the Houthis to lose the civil war because we want our allies, Saudi Arabia, to have a beneficial government in Yemen. We do not have, or under any delusion, that Taiwan is going to invade and retake the mainland. The Truman administration gave up those hopes a long time ago. The Sheikh and his offspring failed miserably. The White Terror is over. There's no auspices. The United States or Taiwan is going to do an invasion. So I need evidence. Tell me
when I thought that I ever said that I thought that was the explicit goal of the United States. Tell me when I said that.
I'm not, but it doesn't make sense for us to sell them.
Why are you creating this straw man and saying that that's what I'm fearful of?
Let me finish.
You're creating a straw man. You're acting in hypotheticals.
You gotta let me finish.
I know you like Vaush, but you probably shouldn't like take every single debate strategy that he's put forward.
Why were you so more nice to Vaush and you're such an asshole now?
Well, you haven't called me a Nazi yet, so there's that. I will be a little bit nicer.
I'm not gonna call you a Nazi because I don't think you're a Nazi.
So Dylan, you say that.
Let me finish. Can I finish my point? Okay, I'm trying to be nice. I specifically, when this Taiwan discourse started, I was like, I'm going to be as good faith as possible. But man, you're testing me, man.
Well, look, you're not being that good faith because you say that you're asking me if my principal concern is over whether or not they're defensive or not.
No, I'm not.
I've said it like 20 times. My principal concern is that we're sending arms to Taiwan.
We're trying to have like somewhat of a discussion here. Since you brought it up, I wanted to talk about it.
Go on.
So my thing is, I don't even think the United States would have a large interest in giving Taiwan offensive weapons at this point, since offensive weapons is not really that could strike the mainland or do any of the civilian damage about the mainland that the United States could provide them, would not benefit our strategic goal, which our strategic goal is to make sure that Taiwan stays independent from China as its own entity. If you don't want to call its government, we'll use the word entity to move forward. So if there's no evidence of us giving them offensive weapons at this point, if neither of us know if there are checks in place, right? I don't understand why we're talking about this. And we can just like,
why we're talking about this again is because you said that they were going to be defensive arms,
and
right?
You objected to that, and so I wanted to see.
And I proved you wrong.
We provided. No, you didn't. You haven't proved that we've given them offensive arms. Show me evidence of that.
No, I proved you were the one who made the claim that these are defensive arms. You could not prove that these are only going to be used for defensive operations.
The weapons that I have seen are weapons that are going to be used for defensive purposes. For example, the F-16s. That's probably the thing that you could maybe make the most hubbub about. That is being given to them because of Chinese. You can call it infringement. You can call it liberation. I don't really care. Chinese aircraft are going into what Taiwan considers its airspace on a frequent basis to test it. They're like prodding it for seeing if there's weak points.
You mean China is flying into Chinese airspace?
Yes, Taiwanese airspace, the separate country. Yes. Taiwanese airspace. But again, let's use. I'm trying to use.
The United States government recognizes that as Chinese airspace, but
no, that's not true. Wait. You just made a claim that's not true. Prove that.
You made a claim that wasn't true.
You just said that the American government acknowledges that it's Chinese airspace. That's not true.
We'll get to it in a second. Give me 1 second, because you said that you said that these were going to be used for defensive operations, and they're not.
Okay.
You can't prove
evidence.
that. You can't prove that.
I'm saying, wait. I said that we're giving them weapons of a defensive character that can be used for defensive purposes, and I know they're going to be used for defensive purposes.
You don't know that.
Okay, show me any intention otherwise. I made a claim. Disprove my claim. How are they going to be used for offensive purposes?
There's no guarantee that these are going to be used for defensive purposes. Okay. I cannot see into the future, Dylan. There's no way. Okay. And also,
so
I would argue.
No evidence.
I would argue.
You don't know if we have checks in place. You don't know if we've given them offensive weapons. In fact, you haven't even disputed that claim. You don't know.
I have disputed that claim. I'm saying that we.
Show me evidence of that. Show me that we sent them offensive weapons.
I'm saying that we claimed that there were going to be defensive operations only used for Saudi Arabian arms in Yemen, and that didn't end up happening. So how can you guarantee, based on the words of the same administration who guaranteed that these arms are only going to be used for defensive operations?
Are completely different. The strategic priority in the conflict in Yemen was that we want the government in Saudi Arabia and their allied government.
No, because you've already said this. So if the aim of Taiwan is to allegedly protect their own airspace, that you call it Taiwanese airspace, if you will, which is a part of the Chinese country, then they would be protecting themselves from their own country, which would mean that they'd be trying to secede if that's how they're going to be using their military against their own country.
The Taiwanese government has said that we don't need to declare independence because we're already an independent country. That's a statement from the president of China, who has.
So why do you think the United States would be having its puppet regimes across the world recognize?
Got any evidence that we control the government in Taiwan through like puppeteering or anything like that, or are we just using this government as?
I don't. Okay. We have foreign policy aims. We didn't control Iran before we started warmongering in Iran and trying to commit regime change in Iran either, or any other country for that matter. That's kind of how regime change works.
So you think we're going to do what is that? How is that relevant to Taiwan? Are we going to do regime change in Taiwan, or what's the allegation?
I never made that explicit claim. I said that it could just be economic splintering from China. It could be trying to, get China to place some sort of like economic sanctions within Taiwan. We don't know, but we do know that the U.S. has sinister goals there, and they are increasing the aggression towards China and increasing their support for Taiwan in a myriad of ways.
Okay.
Specifically, the political groupthink within Taiwan who would like to either secede or have limited engagement with China.
Okay. Again, the government of China, of China. Okay, I understand that is their position. That is your position. But the government of Taiwan has said they don't even need to declare independence because they already consider themselves independent. The people of Taiwan have elected Tsai Ing-wen on 2 occasions, and she is one of the most separate country, quote unquote, independence candidates you could possibly think of.
Do you understand though that there are people within Taiwan who would love to have Taiwan secede in the same way, in the same way that on year after year after year, Bolivians resoundingly elected Evo Morales to serve as president, but then you had a very, very, very small faction of individuals led by Janine Áñez who led a coup in the country. The popular will doesn't matter when the U.S. empire is involved.
Okay, so the popular will does not matter when the U.S. empire is involved.
Correct.
Now, let me just say, the people in Taiwan that want to be back part of China is a very, very, very small minority. The same way that the population doesn't matter. So the will of the Taiwanese people does not matter is one of the things you're saying here.
To the U.S. empire, it does not matter. To me, it matters.
Well, you just see it as an arm of the U.S. empire, but I don't see it simply as that.
Am I providing arms to Taiwan, or is the U.S. empire providing arms to Taiwan?
The U.S. empire is partying terms of Taiwan, but just because the United States supports arms, weapons, whatever you want to call it, just because the United States supports a country through military means or economic means, does not mean we need to just disregard what their people want to say. That's very dismissive of the Taiwanese needs. What is that? Why would you
not what I'm saying.
Their population?
That's not what I'm saying at all. You're misconstruing my words. What I'm saying is the U.S. empire. No, I care more about the needs and the wants of the Taiwan people than you do. What the U.S. empire wants is to exert dominance and expand their empire in every way, shape imaginable. And they're going to do that by countering China in their eyes. Now, I think that's actually a very, very, short-sighted approach. I think the U.S. should be working in a mutually beneficial way with China to expand their reach across the globe. I think that makes far more sense for the longevity of, the U.S. empire and our country and our prosperity of our people. But the U.S. empire currently is engaging in a campaign of all-out aggression with China, and this is just a piece in their puzzle. Taiwan is a piece of their puzzle.
So if that's the case, then would you be in support of the Chinese military backing off, the American military backing off, and the Taiwanese people having a referendum that is monitored by both Chinese, American, and international officials, so they can all make sure that it goes by the books, there's no interference of some sort? Would you be in favor of that then? A referendum, and the Taiwanese people can pick their own future?
I'm not sure I would support that. No, because I think if you had looked at California in 2016 and you had taken a fucking poll amongst all Californians in 2016, I mean, it's definitely questionable as to whether or not this would have happened, but there's a chance that the majority of Californians would have voted to secede, and I think that's fucking absolutely dumb.
Okay.
Taiwan is a part of China. And that's all it is. I mean, if they want to
Chinese
secede,
government's position, yes.
If they want to secede, then they are going to have to guarantee, based on their own rights, that they can actually, leverage their own power as a sovereign country and secede without U.S. backing, right? Without U.S. armament.
So what you're saying in this case is that the might makes right here.
I think Taiwan could not. I don't think Taiwan could secede independently and form their own sovereign country without the support of the U.S. empire. And if a country can't do that,
I could say the same thing about Palestine.
They shouldn't be guaranteed their own country.
So do you hold that opinion for Palestine as well?
Israel wouldn't be able to maintain dominance and control over Palestine had they not had all of the military support. They have nuclear
weapons. Let's say we dropped it all right now. Well, now they most certainly have nuclear weapons.
I think we're in agreement here, but I think you are misunderstanding what I'm saying, because I think I agree with you.
Okay, I believe Palestine should have its own independent country,
correct.
And that what's happening right now in the West Bank is barbaric.
Are you a two-stater or are you one-stater?
I
know
don't
you said
think...
in the past you supported two-state solutions.
So I would say two-state, because I don't think one state is practical or could ever happen unless it was under an Israeli government, which I do not want.
I think a two-state solution is far more impractical, but that's neither here nor there. What I'm saying is I'm in agreement with you in that I don't think Israel would be able to maintain dominance over Palestine or been able to expand as much as they have over the past several decades without U.S. backing, which actually further backs up my point about Taiwan.
But then the question would be about, so right now, if let's say Israel moved in and they were like, all of this land is ours, we claim it all, nobody can stop us. Now we know that recently Taiwan has gone on a diplomacy beach, basically like blast, and nobody would practically stop them. Nobody would, either through alliance purposes or the fact that they have nuclear weapons. So under that situation, are you saying that the international community should just stand down and not do anything? Because at the end of the day,
if Israel took all of that?
Yes, if Israel took all of Palestine right now.
No, Dylan, I'm not saying that, because you need to fucking listen to what I'm talking about. Israel wouldn't be able to expand the reach that they have if they didn't have U.S. backing over the past several decades.
Yes,
listen to the words that are coming out of my fucking mouth.
I heard
You're not listening to the words that are coming out of my mouth. And I said that a country, if they cannot guarantee their own sovereignty without help, without support from another country like the United States Empire, then they should not be their own country. That's exactly what I just fucking argued.
Do you see how that, again, so America drops the support right now. You think this example wouldn't work because America has supported in the past. So even if we dropped, let's say we stopped funding the Iron Dome, we stopped funding everything. We said, we're out, not our issue. We need to rebuild our infrastructure. We need Medicare for all, right? Which I know is something you would support doing, right? We pull out. Israel could do what I'm saying. They might do. Just go in there. This is all ours. So what should the international community do then?
If the Israeli... Okay, Dylan, I'm just going to say it very clearly, and I'm also going to counter that point you just made. because it's actually an interesting point. If Israel hadn't had all the supports that they've had over the years, they wouldn't have been able to build up their military into the point where it can now do that without further U.S. backing. You, again, are just looking at this isolated situation rather than the complex history of U.S. foreign policy as it relates to Israel in the modern era. Had the United States not provided all of the carrots that we've provided to Israel over the past few decades, they wouldn't be able to just do this today without further U.S. backing. Now, what I'll also say to counter that point is there have been numerous assessments that have been drawn up surrounding Israeli security on their northern borders and whether or not they could actually maintain a stronghold on northern cities within Israel if resistance groups began attacking, and how long they'd be able to manage those. I mean, there's a reason why the Ben Gurion airport had to shut down for the longest extended portion it's ever been shut down for during this recent assault, because the resistance has grown, and it has grown to a point where it can actually threaten Israeli defense. And also, you had the resistance launch multiple successful rocket strikes into Israel that passed through the Iron Dome, which also was a new, it was a new exhibiting of resistance forces. So, I don't think if they hadn't have had all that support from the U.S. empire over the past decade or past several decades, they wouldn't be able to do that today. But also, I think their support is dwindling as is with U.S. support, and if U.S. support was cut, the time in which they'd be able to maintain their dominance would be questionable.
Okay. I think the example works, but just to be diplomatic, I'll move off of it and say, what about...
You didn't provide any evidence as to how it works.
I'm moving off of it because this example...
Because you lost. Because you didn't provide any evidence as to how
your
argument stands.
Do you really want me to stand here and argue about this for 20 minutes, or do you want me to use an example that would be
more
precedent?
No, I don't want you to stand here for 20 minutes and argue about this. I want you to accept that you were very wrong in that assessment.
Please? Because I won't, and then
because you're uninformed. You claim to be a foreign policy advisor. You claim to be very informed about this, but you don't know your ass from your elbow.
So I didn't advise those candidates, or what do you mean I claimed?
You did, but you claimed to be someone who's actually informed about this.
Yes, again, I am, but
you don't know your ass from your elbow.
Okay, then we'll argue about this for longer. My point didn't have to do with American military support, and we don't know if without American military support...
What was your point? What was your point?
My point was that if a nation can beat and subdue another nation using force, or a people,
specifically about Israel and U.S. support for Israel. What is your point?
Israel force. Yes, my point was that if America was to drop all of its support and all the international,
so it
backers,
is about military support for Israel, right?
Yes, it is in
part.
Well,
you just said it wasn't about military support for Israel.
I'm using my example has to do because my
example we were just debating about.
Look,
you just said it didn't have anything to do with
U.S.
military
letting
support,
me talk. You gotta let me finish
you're
my
talking
sentences.
In circles. I can't help it.
Well,
I'm
then
just
how
out all
am I going to talk? How are we going to go back and forth? My statement is that if America dropped its military support for Israel, we stop supporting it, which you want to happen, right?
Yes, I would love it if the U.S. stopped providing military support for Israel.
Okay, wonderful. And so that scenario, we live in that world. We're outie, right? At that point, now we could say Israel. We could talk about the Spanish-American War in Cuba as a similar example, if we want to move to that one. But my point had to do with just because a larger force like Israel can dominate the Palestinian people does not mean it should be able to, that a people should be able to decide on their own if they want to be their own independent country through votes. That's why if California voted to be independent, I'd be in support of it. Same with Texas. A great example of this is if with the Spanish-American War happened, right? 1898. After it was done, there was... Yes?
I thought we were sticking to Israel and you wanted to keep
we'll stick to that then.
You said you were talking about Israel. I really do believe that if Israel hadn't received all the support they've received over the past several decades, and if they stopped receiving reports or support starting today, that, in the first scenario, they wouldn't be able to exert as much power and have as much control over Palestine that they currently have. But B, if they did stop receiving support from the U.S., their Iron Dome would crumble. They would run out of rockets. I mean, Israel ran out of rockets during the Obama administration during one of their assaults on Palestine, and they literally had to ask Obama to like immediately send them more rockets. I mean, Israel is very fragile. I don't think you understand this. I know
Israel is not very fragile.
Israel?
So the problem is in this scenario,
Israel
let's say
is
they
very
run
fragile.
They have nuclear weapons. If a force invades, they're going to nuke them and millions will die.
And they have chemical weapons as well. But how did they get those? With the support of who?
They got them with the support of the United States. But
So
let me finish
my
my statement. But let's talk about 1948 then. We can just talk. Wait, we can just talk 1948.
How did they get them? Tell me.
Through help. I just told you. Through help of the United States. But let's talk about 1948 then. 1948. Israel wins its war of independence. America's not giving them nuclear plans. We're not giving them this. There were individual Americans who went over there, but that has to do with Zionism. That's not directly America coming down like, here's all your soldiers and here's your everything. And they win their quote unquote war of independence, right? They use the Balfour Declaration as principle, and they're like, here we are, right? There was still a Palestine-Israel issue then. And my same principle would still apply, that if they were able to dominate those people which they were already dominating in 1948, when we look at what the Lahai was doing to Palestinians, massacring them in some instances, right? That wasn't right. They're not allowed to just dominate those people. They should get a vote on whether this is the state of affairs they want. That's my point I'm trying to get out here. It didn't essentially have to do with American support, and we can remove this from the scenario if you want to and go back to 1948.
Because it does. I mean, Israel has lost wars to Lebanon. Israel has lost... Israel, literally, people characterize what just happened in the most recent assault. They characterize that as a loss because Israel had to stop their ground invasion, which they were planning in Gaza, right? I mean, that's exactly what happened, and that's why so many experts on this issue claim that this was actually a loss for Israel. So I do push back on this notion that Israel is some sort of a innately strong country that can overpower any of their neighboring countries, because they wouldn't be able to. They can barely do so with U.S. support, with decades and decades and decades of U.S. support, billions of dollars per year, and they wouldn't be able to. There's no doubt in my mind. There's no doubt in my mind that they wouldn't be able to do that, and they wouldn't have been able to expand their country to all the settlements they have today if it weren't for decades of U.S. support. I mean, do you really honestly believe that if it wasn't for decades of U.S. support that they wouldn't have been able to do that?
I do think that they would not be able to do what Israel today would not look how it looks. It'd probably look closer to 1948.
Okay, so you agree
that's my view. Well, no, because my position would still hold for the Palestinians within Israeli territory in 1948. My position would still work.
No,
is that those Palestinians should still be able to decide. They shouldn't be made refugees out of their own ancestral homeland.
No, because the principal argument we had here surrounding Israel was that a country should not be able to stand on their own and be considered a sovereign nation if it has to rely directly upon another country for the majority of their military support or their economic aid. That's what we were talking about, and you just proved my point
Cuba?
That if Israel
then we can move on to Cuba.
Fine,
for diplomatic reasons, I'll just say you're right.
I was about to make a point. My chat was about to get really excited. I was about to finish. You just made my point that if Israel hadn't have had decades of U.S. support, it would look closer to what it looked like in 1948, which actually proves my point that we were having from the start of this.
My point had to do with the fact that even in 1948, it would still stand that there would be Palestinians displaced by settler colonialism. Would you agree with that, right? And that's my issue, that shouldn't be decided just by the military force of Israel asserting itself in 1948, that the people of Palestine should be able to vote about their ancestral homelands, which they were being expelled from and turned into refugees.
It's not a matter of them voting. I mean, it's a matter at that point of international law and the disregard for it.
So it isn't just... So what you're saying is this is not just that a nation should be able to defend itself, or people should have to defend itself if it wishes to rule itself, and it should not. In that instance, it would be relying on other countries for support. That would be the international community getting involved.
No, that's just relying on international law, the law, not the strongholding of other countries, not the military support of other countries. That's just the rule of law.
So it should be a law that no one follows because the UN is a paper tiger.
What?
Because under the scenario, there needs to be countries that go in to enforce international law. Without it, law is just a paper tiger. A law that is unenforced is no law at all. It's just pieces of writing on paper. We saw that play down in Yugoslavia, for example.
No, I don't think that. I don't think that you necessarily have to have military intervention to guarantee the upholding of international law.
You do not. So what do you think would happen? And by the way, so would you say sanctions is then a okay way to support then? If the international community sanctioned Israel, then that would be okay. But that would not be the use of other countries to prop up Palestine.
I think every non-military example of like diplomatic means should be carried out before you are implementing sanctions that directly impact the citizenry of a country, or before you engage in military intervention. But anyways, I mean, we're kind of getting into another argument now.
Okay.
But I mean, I won that argument. So what else do you have for me?
The ones who have to declare victory and prove to everyone that they won are usually not the ones that do the best. Right?
No, because
Deontay Wilder, Adrian Broner.
I was literally explaining to you how wrong you were. And then you were like, I don't want to sit
Broner
here and debate this for 20 more minutes.
Twitch,
and then
man.
I was like, well, I mean,
I beat Manny Pacquiao. I beat him. I beat Manny Pacquiao. I don't care what anybody says. I beat him.
The
judges are wrong.
I did. And then I was like, you know what? If Dylan wants to sit here and try to provide a new argument, then sure, I'll hear him out. But did I hear you out? And did you provide yes, I did. And did you provide a new argument? No, you didn't. And we're sitting at the same exact place we were just at. So are you
saying, you had to secede the point that Palestine and the Palestinians in 1948 would need international support from other countries backing international law for there to be anything done about Israel. Without other countries using force, people aren't going to do shit. The state needs to use force to make people follow laws. If not, it's just writing on papers, social norms, and social norms are not going to dictate that Israel doesn't abuse Palestinians.
Dylan, the primary argument we were having was that a country should not be allowed to stand on its own without military, specifically we were talking about military support from another country, right? That's what we talked about from the beginning. Okay, yes. Okay, so is the upholding of international law guaranteeing that, international law is upheld? That's not the same thing as providing direct military support for an imperialist country to, take over another sovereign
in many ways
people.
It is. Example is the Scarborough
Shoal. It's not in any way, shape,
China
or form,
lost
Dylan.
in an international court when it came to the Scarborough Shoal. They ignored it and kept doing what they were doing. So
exactly, and I said that every diplomatic means should be tried before you engage in military intervention.
So what would you do then instead if military support is the last thing? What would you do when it comes in 1948, Israel-Palestine? What would your strategy as the chief? Let's say the UN is actually something at this point, like actually doing shit. Like, what would you do? What would your means then if it wouldn't be the military would have no involvement? What would your message be? Because I don't see any other option besides the threat at some point of military force.
If I was respecting the will of the international experts who, were guiding the location of where Jewish people were to be guaranteed a homeland, post-war homeland, I would have respected the will of that international community that were alleged to have been experts on this, that was made up of also, I believe, 2 members from the United States, which said that Palestine should not be the explicit guaranteed homeland of the Jewish people. I would have respected that.
And do what about it?
I would have said that Palestine, if these international experts, the Palestinian people are all saying that Palestine should not become the homeland of the Jewish people, I would not have issued a executive declaration that we are going to form a new home for the Jewish people in Palestine.
Okay, so talk is one thing, right? Neville Chamberlain talked a lot.
Well, you just asked me what I would have done, and I told you.
Yeah, and you said you would have said this, and you would have said that, and you would have said this.
No, I said I wouldn't have guaranteed an executive declaration which guaranteed the Jewish people homeland in Palestine. That's how they were guaranteed their homeland in Palestine.
So are you talking about the United States presidential Not the Balfour Declaration.
I'm talking about the U.S. support for the Balfour Declaration.
Okay, the U.S. support for the Balfour Declaration. So that would have happened with or without the United States. That was done in 1917 as a way. It was actually anti-Semitic. Wait, it was anti-Semitic.
No, I'm saying it wouldn't have. I'm saying it's questionable as to whether or not it would have happened without.
But the
US
British
support.
did it. The British did it.
But
and
you
they
needed US
they
support,
propped
right?
it.
You needed
well, they
US.
well,
you needed you needed everyone.
You did
to
not
agree
need
to
US.
This.
No, you did not need, because the thing is, we had the Sykes-Picot Agreement. We had the McMahon and Hussein.
Dylan, think if you had a competent US
up.
force, a competent executive branch that would have done exactly what we did in Iraq, right? You sway member states to support your foreign policy aims, and you would have gotten them to not support the effort to create a homeland for the Jewish people in Palestine. But I don't even know how we got here, because we were initially talking about whether or not a country could stand up for itself based on their lack of military armament coming from another country. And you literally made the claim. That Israel would be able to stand up for itself and expand its own territory without direct support from...
Right now, yes, in 1948.
No,
wait.
You were looking at this in an isolated situation.
Then we moved
You're looking at this in an isolated situation.
Fine, can we move on to a different example which doesn't have your problem with it?
History.
Can we move over to
history?
Look, okay, then let's look at totality of history. Cuba, it was 1898. Cuba, American-Spanish War, right? After the American-Spanish War, there was a lot of discussion about whether Cuba would become an American state, its own thing, or whatever, right? Now, let's say you or whatever, anybody in the world, and you see the United States say, you know what? Yeah, Cuba is a state now. Cubans, obviously, many of them would not be happy. Maybe they revolt, but if we just swiped away the Spanish military, there's not much they can do. So let's say the Americans beat the shit out of Spanish rebels, just like we beat the shit of native rebels multiple times. Would the might make right argument apply there? Or we just move over to native tribes in the United States?
So you literally said that Israel today would be able to exert their dominance across Palestine.
Okay.
You said that at the start of your statement, you just said that, yes, you believe Israel would be able to currently, as it is today, exert their dominance across Palestine, right? That's what you said. So I would question, what arms does Israel have to do that are not directly provided by or funded in part by the U.S. empire?
Well, number one, if we stop funding them, that doesn't make all their arms disappear, right? They still have guns that we give them before, but it's not just us.
I understand that.
It's
I'm
also...
not a fucking dumbass, you piece of shit. I'm saying in a hypothetical situation, you're saying that Israel would be able to do this without U.S. support, but the U.S. has provided support for all of this stuff. That's my fundamental argument.
We're talking about RIE going forward.
That's my argument.
Can we move on to something else, or do you want to keep yelling about this?
No, I'd love to move on. You were the one who wanted to continue talking about this.
Okay. Now, could you answer my question about Cuba?
I'm going to be honest. I didn't care what you said because I was going to push back on that, so I went and got water. You want to say it again?
Okay. In 1898, we fought the Spanish, right? And we beat them pretty bad, right? The start of that war is still hotly debated today. And after the end of it, there was two debates in the United States, what to do with Cuba and what's to do with the Philippines, because those were the two pieces of territory we were able to wrangle from them. Obviously, the Philippines never became a state, and that was never even up for debate. It was going to become America's biggest and most pronounced. A lot of people say this is the start of American colonialism overseas. I disagree. I think it started before, but it's one of the most cited examples. But Cuba, many Americans actually wanted Cuba to become a state. And to be honest, there's not much Cubans could have done to stop that. We just obliterated the Spanish military presence in Cuba, which stopped Americans from going in. So the Americans go into Cuba. We move Spanish soldiers. United States, let's say, they declared Cuba as a state now. Many Cubans don't like that. Is the fact that they can't push out the Americans because they don't have the means to do so at that point. And let's say 20, 30 years passes, we're occupying that. Is that a righteous or okay occupation? Should the international community do nothing just because might makes right there and they don't have the means to defend themselves without the help of Spain?
If we had called them a state?
Yeah, we declared that they were a state, because there was a debate about that in 1898.
Well, did they become a state?
No, I'm asking in the scenario that we did declare them a state. We were like, they are a state. And the Cubans obviously would not be happy about that. Then what?
They never became a state.
Yes, I'm asking. Okay, I know Cuba's not a state. But I'm saying in 1898, after the Spanish-American War, when that debate was going on...
Dylan, I literally just spent like 20 minutes talking to you
about
a real-world example with Israel and Palestine.
And we're moving to a hypothetical.
Because your point was proven wrong. So you want to engage in hypotheticals.
What do you mean it was
this
proven
actually,
wrong?
This actually was one of the debate tactics. When I was prepping for my debate with Vaush, this was one of the debate tactics that everyone told me not to engage with, because everyone said, when Vaush begins engaging in these hypothetical scenarios, you need to turn it back to the real-world examples. You need to turn it back to the real-world examples.
This is a real thing that could have happened.
Are not material, Dylan.
But it was material. There was an actual debate about it, right? So my question to you is, in 98, there was a debate about whether this would happen. And my stance would be, we shouldn't just make them a state because we have more power than them and they can't defend themselves without Spanish help. I just proved you wrong
with a real-world example. Now you're dealing in hypotheticals.
No, you didn't. Now you're coping. Why are you moving? Just answer the hypothetical. What's wrong with the hypothetical? What's wrong with it?
I don't dictate arguments based upon hypotheticals. I act upon real-world examples.
How do you have conversations then?
I'm not going to engage with your hypothetical.
So you're saying Catalonia should not be its independent country if it wants to be?
I'm going to be honest, I don't know enough about that to speak to it, and I also don't speak on things that I don't know about. So I'm not going to talk about that.
What about a Kurdish state? Kurdish people have wanted a nation for very long.
Dylan, don't even get me started on this. Don't even get me. You just made me so excited. This is a good real-world example that I'm actually informed on. You want to talk about that?
Sure. Why not?
Okay. So the Kurdish people could not guarantee their own sovereign entity until there was U.S. support prevalent in the region. The U.S. now claims to own and occupy, this is per Dana Stroul, who now works for the Biden administration on U.S. Syria foreign policy, that the U.S. claims to own 1/3 of Syria, own and occupy. They are doing that with the help of the Kurds, but the Kurds could not do that on their own. They had to have U.S. support. They couldn't do that on their own.
Okay. So what you're saying is because since they don't have enough power to start a rebellion against Iran, Iraq, the Turkish government in Syria, because there are people displaced by borders, because the borders of the Middle East were cut up in a very, let's say, hasty manner, right? They should not have a state. So that's your reasoning.
I'm saying that
I'm not asking about current
country.
American. I'm asking, should it be its own country?
I don't think that the Kurds would be able to secede and create their own region without the support of the U.S. or another imperial power.
Why does that support? Why does that remove a people's right to self-determination if it has to be violent? There's been many peoples who have been dominated by superior military powers. Native Americans is a great example. I would have supported international support for Native Americans struggling to maintain their independence against American Manifest Destiny.
This is the primary basis of my argument, though. If you can't support your own state, right? If you can't support your own state, then you shouldn't be trying to call yourself a sovereign nation because you don't have the means to defend yourself. You don't have the means to create a social fabric that will stand up to another country that is currently, is made up of the land that you claim to want to occupy.
You're American, right?
Yes.
You do know that France supported us during the American Revolution. Without French support, there's a good chance we would have stayed a British colony.
I mean, sure.
So would you have rejected French support and then had the American Revolution fail and stay a member of the crown?
I have many problems with the way in which this country was founded. Yes, I have many problems.
You would have rejected French support.
Not necessarily. I just have many problems with the way this country was founded in general. But if you want to keep talking about Syria, because I do concede, I have problems with the way this country was founded. We can keep talking about Syria because you did want to talk about that.
Number one, I didn't say Syria. I said Kurds, and Kurds exist across multiple borders.
Where would a Kurdish state be in part located, Dylan?
In part Syria and Iran and Turkey and Iraq, right? And I believe.
And where are they currently occupying?
The SDF, which is majority Arab, are occupying part of northeastern Syria.
Correct. So we're going to talk
majority
about
of its
Syria.
forces are Arab, by the way, so it would not just be a Kurdish state, by the way.
They want a Kurdish state. That's what they want.
That's not what they want.
They do.
The SDF.
That's what
has
this
accepted.
whole agreement with the U.S. providing
No,
support there is.
No, that's not. The SDF has wanted to negotiate with Assad to get very similar to something very similar to the Kurdistan Regional Government of northern Iraq. They've said this in multiple press releases. Their supreme commanders have said it. Multiple people in SDC have said this multiple times, that they do not seek independence from Syria. They seek something similar to a regional government, the way, say, Catalonia has its own regional government.
And without, because there are though many people who make up that group who do want a sovereign state. I'd imagine you would concede on that, right?
Yes, I assume there are people who have many different diverse political opinions in northern Syria.
For years, that has been the primary debate surrounding the Kurds is creating a Kurdish state, correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
The last time they tried.
I'm saying is you have this group that in no way, shape, or form could be occupying the land that it currently occupies without the help of the U.S. Now, the U.S. did them dirty and said in a statement that Dana Strauss said we recognize this as 1/3 of Syria that we now own and occupy. They specifically targeted this land, not because it's Kurdish land or because it's land that this coalition wants to target and gain control of. They targeted it in their own words because it is the hydrocarbon and wheat-rich region of Syria, and they are going to cut off Bashar al-Assad from their raw resources, such as those, and that's exactly what they're doing. They're taking tankers of oil from this region across the border into Iraq. They're smuggling it into Iraq. This is exactly what they're doing. There's a Delaware-based natural gas firm that has been sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury Department to operate in this region of Syria. It's what they're doing. There's no other way to spin it.
That didn't respond to anything I just said.
It
you just
does,
basically...
Dylan. Because your primary argument is that they should be able to have their own state without support, military or otherwise, from a sovereign country.
Didn't have to do with any of that.
Saying,
okay? All of that was not important. I don't believe that your ability to use power and force dictates your ability to be a people that should rule themselves. That is why I support Kurdish independence, because the Kurds across every country they are in right now, they are treated absolutely god-awful. In Iran, they're mowed down when they protest. In Syria, they were mowed down by both Bashar al-Assad's father and Bashar al-Assad himself in 2004 after the football protests. In Turkey, they were called Mountain Turks. They had their language banned, and their children are shot by security forces. In Iraq, they got this thing that was closest to the Kurdish liberation in a way with the KRG government, but the government of Iraq still went in Kirkuk, and it was not a really good time when that happened. And so the Kurdish people have looked at the situation across all borders and said, we are treated like shit any other time when it is not a Kurd making policies, because the other people fear Kurds. They think we're rebellious. They think we're disgusting. They think we're bad. They think we're a threat to Arabs. We deserve our own state. And I do not believe just because they're a minority or because they are cut across multiple borders that struggle that they have should be dictated just by the means of not being able to take on one of the most powerful militaries in the world, in the Turkish government, for example.
Okay, so that's your reason for supporting a Kurdish state, I guess. But my argument here is that a Kurdish state would not be able to stand without U.S. support, and also it ties back into the original conversation quite nicely we were having, actually.
What if I don't care?
Because what if you don't believe that?
No. I said, what if I don't care?
Well, I mean,
because I don't care, because I do not, because I don't believe
we're having.
Because I don't believe that the American Revolution.
It's okay.
The thing is the same. Wait, let me finish.
It's okay. It's okay. Actually, I was in the middle of something, so I'm gonna finish. But
okay, you finished.
It ties quite nicely back into the initial argument we are having, right? That if a country cannot stand on its own without military support from another country, then I mean, at that point, it can't call itself a sovereign entity, sovereign nation, and that's exactly what's happening in Syria right now. That's exactly what's happening in Syria.
My thing is, I don't think that just because another country comes in and assists somebody and they struggle for liberation, or even if it's for self-beneficiary means, like the United States is not doing it because there's some angel. I know there are Americans who support the Kurdish struggle. There's a lot of reasons why we got involved in northern Syria. Multiple strategic reasons. There were some who, of course, saw what happened at Sinjar, and the public outcry was enormous. But my main issue doesn't have to do with any of that. It has to do with the fact that I don't believe that just because they cannot, well, you gotta let me finish, okay? I let you finish when you said you wanted to finish. I do not believe that just because it could not hold up by themselves, that that their rebellion is not correct, that they should not be able to rule themselves. It's why I believe the French should have supported the American Revolution. It's why I believe that that the Kurdistan regional government has a right to exist and has greatly benefited the Kurds of northern Iraq. So did Operation Provide Comfort. And that's the same reason why I believe that the SDF will hopefully get their regional government, will stop more incidents like the 2004 Qamishli riots, the same way I will support. I would have supported Native American tribes against Americans going in and shooting Native American children, women, and men.
Dylan, we are dealing with the modern American U.S. empire, and the modern U.S. American empire is the only reason why this coalition of forces in northeast Syria is currently occupying that region. If it weren't for the U.S., they would not be able to do that. Care. The U.S.'s primary aim, though, and every time we do something like this, is to balkanize a country. That's what I'm getting at here. I know you reject this notion that the U.S. acts in the modern U.S. empire acts in every imaginable instance as it relates to intervention or military backing in a way that only serves the interests of the U.S. empire, military-industrial complex, corporate elite, transnational corporations. I make that claim, I make that argument, and I feel very strongly about that. And you can see that that's exactly what's happening in Syria. The aim is to balkanize the country. Okay,
so let me ask you a question then. Why did that not happen in Iraq once the Kurdistan regional government formed? Because that was due to American creation. Well, that is a perfect example, and that's the exact same thing.
I mean, it's an example I can't really engage with because I'm not familiar with it.
If you're not, well, then, but this is also literally right next to them, and this is what they're looking towards as an example. What happened was that
I don't even know what year that is.
What year? What is?
When you claim that was created.
Okay, the Kurdistan regional government was officially created post the Iraq invasion, but it was unofficial for a long.
But it was unofficial. No, because it's a regional government. The U.S. is helping the Kurds and other minorities that make up those forces occupy that region and try to create a balkanized country. That's what they're doing in the Idlib province as well. They're trying to create their own territory within that region. It's not like a government that is acting under Syria. They're not acting under Syria. They don't allow the people in that region to vote in Syrian elections. It's very different.
Yes, because right now they're in conflict with the Syrian government, the SDF, and multiple fronts. And
so, they wouldn't be able to occupy it if it weren't for the U.S.
Yes, I'm happy they supported them. Okay,
so here's my point. If they didn't have U.S. backing,
let me finish. I don't care. If you didn't have U.S. backing,
if you didn't have U.S. backing, I'm just gonna mute you. If you didn't have U.S. backing, you can come back in a second. If you didn't have U.S. backing, you'd probably have a regional government at best, but you wouldn't have a sovereign nation.
He's muted. I'm muted.
Go for it.
Muted. You finished? Okay. You were muted too. So nothing was productive there. Okay. So the SDF is not looking to be its own independent country. It has never claimed to be its own independent country. It is not doing anything that would be in the means to get its own independent country. It's not starting up embassies around the world. It's not.
What is it doing right now?
It wants to be its own regional government similar to the KRG.
What is it doing right now?
It is occupying a part of Syria because they want leverage in negotiations with the Syrian government.
So they're occupying part of Syria that they no longer claim to be a part of Syria.
With them. Assad rejects negotiations with them. They specifically have done negotiations with all these people.
Because they're a force that is aiming to balkanize the country.
Why that you have no proof that the SDF has that guide. You can
They're
say
literally occupying the country right now. They're not trying to create a mutually beneficial agreement. They're trying to occupy the country.
It is very clear. They don't want mutually official agreement.
They're doing exactly what the U.S. empire wanted them to do. They're stealing their raw minerals. That is exactly what's happening.
Talking about the SDF has never declared this.
Why would the
they have
US
never
be
pursued
engaging?
this because a regional government, which let's say that the Assad government doesn't have troops in,
government.
They're not going to get a regional government unless they have military power. That's what happened in the KRG.
If they wanted a regional government that bad, why wouldn't the U.S. come in if they were such like fucking on a humanitarian mission there? Why wouldn't they come in and they can easily force Assad to do a lot of things right now? Why wouldn't they force them to do this? If they can take over, I can tell you about this. This happened already. What you're talking about already happened. Dylan, if they can force their occupation of 1/3 of the country and steal the raw minerals out of that 1/3 of the country, don't you think they could have conceded power and forced a mutually beneficial regional government agreement? They could have, but they didn't want to because they wanted to balkanize the country.
You don't know what you're talking
about.
Steal their
oil and steal their wheat and cut off the Syrian government and Bashar al-Assad from all of their raw minerals. That's exactly what...
How do you say you know a lot about this and then know nothing
exactly
about Northern Syria?
All right. Let me just ask you two questions.
No, you just you just got your whole spiel.
Two questions or else you're a beta.
I'm not listening. I gotta speak.
Two questions or else you're a beta.
Okay, I don't care. I'm a beta. Anyway, I don't care. I'm a beta. I don't care. I'm a beta. You're disputed now, so I'm gonna talk to my own audience. Okay, audience. So here's the thing.
God, this dude fucking sucks, bro. I knew this dude was gonna fucking suck. He sucks so much. He absolutely sucks. Certified fucking beta because he didn't want to answer these questions. Look, I mean, if the U.S. can take over 1/3 of Syria, then they can definitely just create a mutually beneficial regional government. Like, what is he saying? He's like, they don't want to create a mutually beneficial government. Exactly. They want to take the country over. Like, what are you saying, bro? I tried to push back. He's just being he won't, that's what I was going to ask him, and that's what I just said, but he won't answer. I'll just wait till he stops talking. God, I'm wrecking him so much right now. Absolutely wrecking. I'll unmute when he's done talking. Okay. Can you hear me?
Now that neither of us has gained, you can ask your questions.
Okay. So, if the U.S. can take over 1/3 of the country, the resource-rich region of the country, with the help of these forces, why would they not be able to create a regional government?
Because Assad has stopped them from coming to negotiations multiple times. They have offered to come. Assad has stopped them because Assad wants direct military control of northeastern Syria.
Yes, because it is Syria, and it would still be a part of Syria under a regional government. And
well, yes,
also, let me just finish. Like, yes, no, it would be if it's a regional government under Syria. It still would be.
No.
But also, why would he give up the resource-rich region, and why would he do any of that? If he doesn't have to.
Okay, so the first thing is, if you look at the KRG, they have their own military. They have the Peshmerga. So
which is US backed.
The Peshmerga, and
US
again,
backed.
yes, and I don't care if it's US backed. That's fine for me. Okay, I don't care. I'm not. If you called me a bread tuber earlier, I'm not a bread tuber. Okay, I don't pretend to be a bread tuber. Okay.
Oh my God.
I don't need to live in the delusional world where U.S. bad all the time and act like a walking gray zone article. Okay.
So why is the U.S. backing them?
The U.S. is backing them because we want the Iraq to be our ally, and because it's strategically beneficial.
Why is it strategically beneficial?
It's strategically beneficial because we have interests against Iran.
And
we don't like Iran. What do you mean? And
you actually don't know what I'm referring to. Two things.
What's the other thing?
Tell me. We're cutting off Syria from their vital resources, the resource-rich region of Syria, and we're stealing it. On top of that,
how by supporting the Peshmerga?
No, by supporting the occupation of northeast Syria.
Okay.
And also,
I don't care.
You don't care about that. That we've
I don't
gone
care
into a sovereign country.
Wait. Well, no. The reason I don't care
and cut it off
is
from the
because
government. Okay, but here's the other thing. Here's the other thing.
You gotta let me elaborate on that.
Here's the other thing. Here's the other thing. Okay, you can elaborate. You can elaborate when I finish my second point. The second thing is that we're all doing it, and this is according, again, to the U.S. State Department. They said this in a statement. We're doing this in an effort to weaken Assad. Now you can go.
Okay. The reason I don't care is because it is the people of northeastern Syria who are currently rebuilding their territory. This is the same reason the Spanish government doesn't like Catalonian independence.
It's Syria.
Is because
there's what? No, you said you were going to defend the U.S.
You got to let me finish.
You said you were going to defend the U.S. stealing their oil.
Okay, you got to let me finish. You got to let me finish.
Defend the point that you made.
The United. We are giving them money for the oil. You do know that, right?
We're stealing the oil from Syria.
Oil companies are giving money to the SDF and the SDC for the oil. That money is then being used by the government of northeastern Syria, whether you want to call it whatever you want.
Force, let me finish. Not to Syria.
Okay, you're just muted. I don't care anymore. If you're not going to let me talk, I'll just mute you and I'll just talk, okay? So we are buying the oil from northeastern Syria, and they are
it from an occupying force.
Rebuilding cities. They are rebuilding territory. They are trying to provide public services, and I believe
it's all
those are the people who stand on that territory.
They wouldn't be able to do that if it wasn't for U.S. support.
Determine what happens with those resources.
It's sovereign Syrian
just like in Catalonia, even though Catalonian independence would be against U.S. interests, and the Catalonians have the majority of the resources. I held the same position for the Native Americans when it comes to the United States when we were fighting our wars with them. Even though they were standing on tons of resources, they should have been the ones who dictate what happened to those resources because they're the ones who live there.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
So when you say that we're paying for the resources, you said that, we are paying the forces that are helping us occupy the region. We're not paying the Syrian government that resources.
No,
meaning
not the Syrian government. The SDC,
resources.
Yes. The SES, SDC,
I know, you dumb fuck. That's what I just said.
No,
we're
you
not
don't
paying
know
the Syrian government. We're not paying the Syrian government that money. So the Syrian people are losing their raw resources due to these occupying forces that wouldn't be able to be there without the help of the U.S. empire. And right, it's just going back into, it's being reinvested in the occupation. Now, again, I'm not entirely familiar with the makeup of the situation in Catalonia. Now, is Catalonia, this is a question for you, is Catalonia being entirely backed up and funded, their regional entity, are they completely backed and wouldn't be able to call themselves a regional entity and wouldn't be able to even, try to fight for self-determination for their own land if it wasn't for a major imperial power?
Would it? It's hard to say because the Catalonia independence movement has been long. It's been violent, but I don't think anyone's going to get involved in Spanish internal affairs unless there's a huge international backlash to some terrible thing the Spanish does.
Okay, so I mean, I don't even know too much about that, and I just picked apart your fucking argument. It's not the same.
Wait, you don't know what you're... Okay. What happened? The problem is that I don't believe just because they have guns and they can shoot people and they win, that determines whether people should or shouldn't be independent, right? I believe if Catalonians want to be independent, then they should be able to be independent, whether or not they have the military strength to do that.
But you're saying that in Syria... It's similar to you're saying in Syria, it's similar.
Oh my God.
In
How
Syria,
did I this before?
You said in Syria it's similar
Assad
to Catalonia
survived because of Iranian and Russian intervention. If it wasn't because of the Russian and Iranian governments, the government would have collapsed.
No, you're not letting me talk.
So do you support that or are you against that?
I didn't hear because I was trying to make my point because you got so butthurt when I interrupted you, so I was going to keep trying to talk. In Syria, you said that it's similar to Catalonia, but in Syria, They are only there and only able to occupy and only able to steal those resources and pay them to the occupying forces because of the U.S. In Catalonia, it's much different because it's a completely, I would imagine an indigenous population that you could not prove as being backed by any imperial force. It's a very different situation.
So you're okay with the Russians and Iranians backing the government and their backing being the reason why they survive?
There's a difference between backing a defensive operation and backing an offensive imperialist operation.
Do you believe that the bombing by the Russian government of a bunch of hospitals, they did 4 hospitals in 12 hours. Do you believe that was defensive? Like those medical patients were like carrying AKs or something?
I mean, are you talking about in Syria?
Yes, they bombed multiple hospitals. In fact, a lot of people are fearful.
Hospitals occupied by the white helmets?
Are you actually going to defend the bombing of hospitals in Syria?
Were they occupied by the white helmets? Assad has done many things I disagree with, but were they occupied by the white helmets? Who cares if they were occupied
by the white helmets? It doesn't change the fact that there were civilians in those buildings.
Do you know who the white helmets are?
I don't care. I don't. Wait.
They're not civilians, Dylan. They're not civilians. That's why I'm asking.
They're not just white helmets in there.
Dylan,
there's
civilians
in those hospitals.
Dylan, do you concede?
Oh my God.
Dylan,
you're a fucking war crime supporter. Jesus Christ, I can't believe it.
Dylan, I know you think this is a really good gotcha, but do you concede? Do you concede that in many cases, military forces in Syria have completely overtaken, gotten rid of civilians in certain territories and regions within Syria and filled hospitals and schools with like military operations?
This has happened in also the Gaza Strip, yes.
This has happened in many countries. This is like a normal thing that happens. So hence why I'm asking, are these hospitals controlled by...
These hospitals were confirmed to have civilian casualties after the fact. Russia doesn't even deny this.
Okay, then I oppose that.
Okay. Great. Because if this was if your thing is...
Dylan,
if you're so angry at the white helmets...
Who is the aggressor? Who is the aggressor here? Is it the covert forces that are being funded?
Assad is the aggressor because he's the one who... Let me finish. Let me finish. You gotta let me define. If you don't let me say...
Who funded the Syrian dirty war? Who funded the Syrian dirty war?
Let me finish my statement or you're never going to get an answer. Okay? Bashar al-Assad began to shoot his people while they were protesting. This is nothing new. He did it in 2004 and he did it in 2011. And he has tortured children, done many things. The Syrian civil war started because the people started to rise up and then the parts of the Syrian army defected. Then international players and the United States, Saudi Arabia, America with Timber Sycamore and many other stuff started to funnel what they wanted to rebel groups, right? But the Syrian civil war started, and then of course Assad got supported from Russia and Iran, and boom, there's your Syrian civil war, and then ISIS
operations. So who started the protests? Or who, I shouldn't say who started the protests, but who expanded the protests, funded covert PSYOP operations to the point where it reached the level it reached?
Those protesters were getting shot despite, are you saying we supported, what did we do to the protesters? What did we give them?
We did the same thing that we do here in the United States internally when we have discontent amongst popular groups. You have covert operations that take place that either promote or try to tear apart popular uprisings to foment regime change or to splinter groups.
What covert operation did we do? Wait, let me finish my question. You don't even know my question yet.
No, okay. You're going to talk about specifically relating to protests in the Middle East, I'd imagine.
Well, yes, but you didn't let me finish my question. What's my question about those protests, right? So are you alleging that before the protesters were shot, we were funneling like weapons and bombs and stuff in there through Timber Sycamore, and that Assad started, this is the second part, which I don't think you alleged, but the second part of my question would be, even if that was the case, is that okay then for Assad to mow down protesters? Because Russia and other governments have done similar things all over the world when it comes to supporting protest movements against their opposition. But that doesn't mean that gives a red light to mow down protesters. You go and you try to do covert operations to deal with the international governments doing that. That doesn't mean you start shooting protesters.
Did you say in 2004?
Well, there was the 2004 Qamishli riots, and then there was the 2011 protest. 2004 has to do with northeastern Syria. That's why the Kurds
was
don't
Assad
trust
president
Assad.
in 2004? I don't think
Yes,
he was even
yes, he was.
during that.
Yes,
Was he?
yes. I promise you, he was.
No, you're right. So
Hafez al-Assad died in, I think, 2000.
So what I'm saying is that this is just it's an objective fact. This is like a common tactic that's used by the U.S. through covert operations.
Yes. So
we bolster.
Show me the evidence of what I asked for.
We bolster propagandistic campaigns to try and tear apart either sovereign governments, democratically elected governments.
I acknowledge we do that. Now, show me evidence.
And Syria specifically?
Well, yes, that's what we're talking about.
We've done so through the white helmets.
Okay. So you're saying we were funding the white helmets before Assad started mowing them down?
That's what I'm asking about. To whether or not Assad was the first person to start this or not. Well, okay, think about this. If you have a force within your country that's being backed up by, fucking a U.S. empire that has obviously ulterior motives, which I don't think you would disagree with me on, then
we have many motives, yeah.
That stem far beyond providing humanitarian support for a just cause within a country. I would argue that's usually the least of our motives. That's the least important of our motives in any given intervention that we face or PSYOP operation we begin. So why is it, you think, that the U.S. would be providing support for these groups? Why is it, you think, that the Obama administration, for example, would allow ISIS to run rampant within Syria? Why is it, you think, that we would do any of this sort of stuff? It all has a covert operation at the end in place, and it's. I mean,
I will answer all of your questions once you answer mine.
Ask your question again.
Okay, my question was because we were trying to find out who's the aggressor, right? And Bashar al-Assad mowed down protesters, tortured protesters. This is nothing new. This is nothing disputed. Okay. Now you're alleging that we threw all this stuff at Syria. I don't doubt that. To Timber Sycamore and multiple things, we have funded a lot of organizations in Syria that oppose Assad. We have done that clearly. My question to you is, you were like alleging that these protesters were like funded by the United States, and so I'm asking you,
backed by the United States.
Yeah, backed by the United States. Wait, backed, not funded.
Funded would imply that there's a monetary transfer.
So if we said that we support those protesters, does that justify Bashar al-Assad mowing them down? Because China has said they have supported protests in the United States at some point. They said, hey, look at the BLM protests in the United States. That wouldn't justify us mowing down BLM protesters. That would be disgusting.
I would say that no, not necessarily. And I would also say that the U.S. doesn't really care about that, but they will they will take any opportunity given to strike upon that and sow discontent amongst the public. So, for example, the U.S. killed 1 million Iraqis in our war there. Do you think the U.S. really cares about 23 Kurdish people who are fighting against Bashar al-Assad and want to create their own sovereign government? No.
Okay, it's not 23. There's hundreds of thousands of people in northeastern Syria, but
no. I'm saying the amount of people that wasn't it like just over 20 that were killed in that initial.
Yeah. It was. What you're talking about? Are you talking about Qamishli, or are you talking about 2011?
2004. Do you know directly whether or not like Bashar al-Assad gave the orders to kill those 23 people?
He did. And the reason why they got really angry is because they started tearing down statues of Hafez al-Assad, his father, and he saw this as a challenge to his rule. He gave the order to send in tanks. There were tanks there. He gave the order. Yes.
So did they shoot them with tanks or did they shoot them with guns?
Machine guns, but the tanks were to back the troops.
Okay, so again, they sent in. He ordered.
And
them
they
to
tortured
send in
children,
tanks.
by the way.
You're alleging that they had them send in tanks.
Well, I'm not alleging. I'm stating a fact. What do you mean? Are you challenging this? Wait.
No, this is your allegation that he sent in tanks. Did he? That's different than saying
an allegation to like say that America invaded France during the World War. Yes,
you stated whatever. I don't fucking care.
This happened.
So did he?
I care a lot about this.
So that's different. That's different than saying that he ordered those troops to fire upon them with machine guns. Do you have evidence for that?
Is that a real question?
Yes, I mean, in the same way that the
So
U.S. is
if
providing military armament
okay,
for
okay,
Taiwan, we're
let
not
me ask you a
explicitly
question.
saying that we
Okay,
want Taiwan to start
so
firing upon China.
I actually do not know if he specifically said shoot the
So
protesters,
don't you
but
think
when
that would
he
be
wait, let me
important?
finish. Let me finish. Let me finish. While it might be an important detail, if I set military troops into any part of my country where protests were happening against my rule, and they start shooting people, they shoot a decent amount of people. 30 to 100 is the estimate that is most widely cited, right? They start shooting these people, and then they capture many and torture children, women, and men. Don't you think there should be some repercussions for that? Or there should be something done? Because if it isn't, that is a tacit endorsement. And it's not hard to assume that when he sent them in there, the goal was to put down those protests because they were staring down statues of his father, who I'm assumed Assad has a nice view of daddy. And he saw this as a challenge to their rule.
I'm just saying that, yeah, I mean, sure, I don't support like indiscriminate ordered killings of civilians. I'm a
Yes,
leftist. I don't support that.
very difficult
But
to
what
say,
I'm
though.
saying is, that that's very different than alleging that Bashar al-Assad directly ordered those killings and knew about it and wanted that to happen.
No. He knew that these happened. He just didn't care. He was like, this is fine, whatever you need to do. He sent them in to do whatever was necessary to put down these protests. Like he's dropped barrel bombs. He knows that barrel bombs have been used. He doesn't care. He's done multiple war crimes.
No, Dylan, come on. You know that so many of these allegations put forward surrounding barrel bombs, surrounding fucking hospital
you don't believe he
bombings.
dropped barrel bombs? Do you want to? And hospital bombings is a proven fact. It's been proven time and time again.
It's a fact, but it matters who's in the hospital, you dumb fuck. It matters
there were
who's
people
in the hospital.
There were civilians in the hospitals. There were civilians in the hospitals. If there was Hamas in a building and civilians in a building, that does not give the Israeli military the okay to destroy that building with all those civilians. I stand against that too, just like I stand against it here.
And I do too. But what I'm saying is, in the same way that with the OPCW cover-up of Duma or with Ghouta, for example, you have allegations from the international community.
By the way, I can only go 15 more minutes.
That do not align with the facts on the ground.
Okay, first I just need to say,
and there have been many entities that have disputed claims. Not all. For example, like breadline bombings, those haven't been disputed. But there have been many entities that have disputed some of these claims that you're putting forward as if they're statements of fact. Okay,
so first, I just want to say I have 15 minutes left, and we're going to hit the 2-hour mark, and that's enough for me. I'm tapping out. I got to get back to my girlfriend who just came back from Portugal, and I want to spend some time with her. So that's the first thing. But the second thing I'll say is, okay, there have been many things disputed. There have been things that have been proven wrong because it's a conflict, an active war zone, and everybody wants to make their side look good and the other side look as bad. So people are going to allege, for example, like when ISIS attacked cities, they would say we killed these many people, and then the other side would be like, you killed barely anybody. This happens all the time. But the things I'm putting forward right now are things that are undisputed. I mean, even Assad. Wait. Let me finish. The barrel bomb claims have been proven by pictures. And the barrel bomb claims. Wait, let me finish. Assad has basically admitted to this on Russian television. He had an RT interview. It was about 2017, and he was asked by a Russian reporter working for RT, which is not like a very American imperialist source, I would say. And they asked him about the barrel bomb claim, and he said, basically, we use whatever weapons are necessary to win the war, and a bomb explodes. That's what it does. If I ask somebody, did you commit a murder? And they said, I used whatever force was necessary. That's an admission. That is an admission of guilt from the 2017 RT interview. Not to mention, this is there now. The question of how many barrel bombs have been dropped is certainly more disputed.
So what I'm saying is a lot of this stuff has been disputed that you're putting forward as objective fact.
What things
Dylan,
have I said that's
Let
being disputed?
me fucking finish. Jesus Christ. Every time I interrupt
your own medicine?
you have a fucking bitch fit. Let me finish talking. Let me finish talking.
Why are you so vulgar? You need Jesus.
Every single time. Okay, there have been many disputed instances that have been alleged by the international community, which I have defended vociferously when there's evidence to back up these disputes, right? In the case of barrel bombs, I understand, right, that there have been barrel bombs that have been used in the Syrian civil war. There's also been torture that has taken place. There have been civilians that have been killed. This has happened on both sides. I don't condone any of it. The question is, who is engaged in more of this?
Barrel bombs? There's been barrel bombs dropped by rebels?
No. I'm saying as a whole, there's been torture, there's been crimes against civilians, there's been barrel bombs been dropped by Assad. By Russian planes too. I don't support that. Okay. I know you think I'm a fucking statist, but I don't support that.
No, I don't care if you're a statist. I'm a statist too. It just depends on like what the government does.
Well, that's a whole nother argument. I mean, I would question what country you're a statist for, but at the end of the day,
wait, can we just be clear? Wait. When you say status, what do you mean?
At the end of the day, no, I don't want to get into another question because I'm in the middle of a fucking argument. So at the end of the day, there's been a lot of disputed points surrounding the crimes that have happened. I still have unanswered questions that I've asked Syrian journalists about alleged war crimes that have been committed by Bashar al-Assad and evidence that has been brought forward by the international community, right? I still have questions that have gone unanswered by Syrian journalists I've reached out to and by people who have actually been on the ground, okay? But also, the key aggressor here today is the United States and the UK, who are fomenting a dirty war in the country that has brought about an untold amount of casualties, suffering, loss of life, and bloodshed for the Syrian people, not to mention the fact that the U.S. is now occupying 1/3 of the country in the northeast, stealing their raw minerals, cutting off the Syrian government and the people from the profits of these raw minerals, and they also have indicated that Jolani, right, that's his name, the guy leading Hayat Tahrir al-Sham in the Idlib province as the de facto leader of that's the group he represented before he put on a suit and tie and the U.S. designated him as an asset in the region, right? You can't push back on that. And who is Hayat Tahrir al-Sham linked with? They are an Al-Qaeda, al-Nusra rebranded organization. So I have no sympathy for the rebels. I have no sympathy for the White Helmets. I have no sympathy for the extremists that are waging a war against the Syrian people and the Syrian government and who are occupying their land. You can look at these in isolated events, or you can look at it in the larger scope of what is happening in Syria, and you can understand that this is an all-out campaign to destabilize the country, topple Bashar al-Assad, and steal their raw minerals.
Okay, so the first thing one second. There was a few questions I had. Let me try to remember the first one. Damn, I think I forgot it. So whatever. I'll just ask this. So the first thing I would say is you have no sympathy for the rebels whatsoever. You stand by that?
Yeah, no, I have no sympathy for the rebels.
Okay. So in 2011, the rebellion started.
What do you think the rebels are doing, Dylan?
You gotta.
What do you think the rebels are doing?
I didn't even get to start my statement.
Well, you're gonna list one time in which there was some war crime committed against them. But you have to understand the primary. What's the primary motive of the rebels?
Jackson,
what's the primary?
Over me
can you name it?
Do anything.
Can you name it?
You gotta. I'm not going to say anything until I can finish my statement.
Can you name it?
I'm not going to answer any questions.
I'm not going to answer any
questions. I'm not going to answer any questions until I get to say my statement. I'm not going to answer it.
What's the primary motive of the rebels?
Jackson, I can't answer it until I finish my statement.
What's the primary motive
I'll answer it later if you just let me say my. If you let me finish my statement.
Al-Qaeda, al-Nusra, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham?
I will.
What's the primary
tell you their motive.
Tell me.
I will tell you your motive if you let me finish my statement. I want to finish my statement. I never got to say anything.
Tell me now, then do your statement.
You never. I'll just. Do you want me to just mute you again and
no,
do
tell
the
it
thing
to me
again, or do you want me to say my statement first? That's the two options you got. I either mute you and I'll just say my whole thing and answer your question, and then you don't get to hear me, or I'll say it now, my statement, and then I'll answer your questions. I never got to respond to anything you said. This is not how our conversation goes. Okay, are you done? Hello? Jackson, I guess Jackson muted me.
Go for it.
Okay, I'm happy that you finished talking to your chat. So
I wasn't talking to them. I was waiting for you to go.
Okay, wonderful. So my statement has to be that in 2011, when the rebellion started, there were many different people with many different interests. For example, the people who fled from the military, those were not people who were just all rank and file Islamists. Those were military defectors, unless you want to say Al-Qaeda had infiltrated deep into the Assad military, and that's where they all broke off. There are, of course, people who are a lot more moderate. What happened in the long run is that those people got fucking slaughtered long run. 2012, 2013, those people got destroyed. A lot of them were in territory that was first targeted by Assad first, and they were jostled out of power. And then post 2013 is when the more Islamist types who were fucking disgusting, like your al-Nusras, your Hayatir al-Shams took over. And those organizations, I don't want to see them control Syria ever. They're disgusting Islamists and engage in terror tactics many times, right? And so my question would definitely be for the 2012, 2011 period, where there were a lot more diversity when it came into the rebellion, and the defecting military troops, which were not terrorists, unless the Syrian Arab Army are just a bunch of terrorists. My question would be to you is, what would you say about the 2011-2012 period when there was a diverse rebellion against Bashar al-Assad and the other international forces got involved? Would you have supported Bashar al-Assad being overthrown then if we could have had the more moderate wing take over?
I'm referring to the current rebels in Syria.
Okay, well, I'm asking you a question about 2012.
Well, I'm talking about the rebels that are waging war crimes against civilians in Syria right now.
The rebels that Turkey supports, and for example, in the Afrin region, which they took in a terrible, barbaric operation, those are majority jihadists, which I do not like. And Turkey is doing terrible things there. And you will get no objections from me. I don't think Turkey should be even in NATO at this point. I will condemn Erdogan any day of the week.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
So I'm talking about the rebels in Syria right now.
Yes, and I just answered your question.
Did you want me to say something?
Well, yes, I answered your question. I said I hate the jihadists. They're terrible. I hope they all lose, and I hope Erdogan stops with the support for those terror groups. And now my second question is, would you have supported the Syrian people in a successful overthrow in 2011, 2012, since the groups that were more dominant then were not?
Oh, my God. Oh, my God. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And I'll answer the question. But oh, my God. You're literally reading this all off of Wikipedia right now. This is hilarious. This is hilarious.
I'm not.
Oh my God.
There's
no way,
this
bro.
Nothing.
You're literally on Wikipedia right now. Oh my God.
Jackson, this is the 2004 Commission riots. Why are you going over Wikipedia? I know this. I've read about it, okay?
Oh my
Daughters
God.
of Kobane.
Wow.
Look it up. I've read this before. I know about
That's
this.
hilarious.
I brought it up.
That's
I brought
hilarious.
I brought it up. Who cares?
Okay.
Who cares?
That's funny. I'll answer your question.
I don't. Why are you so disingenuous?
At that point in time, the Obama administration was already moving forward with an explicit policy of allowing these extremist rebel groups, as they define them, which included ISIS, to run rampant within Syria and destabilize the Syrian government. It means that they could have used their forces, either proxy or their own forces within certain regions of Syria, to try and stop ISIS from gaining more military control of the Syrian country, right?
Okay.
John Kerry admitted this. He said, during the Obama administration, during the middle of the Obama administration, we are allowing ISIS to, I don't remember his exact words, but you can
Could you send me a source on it, though? I just want to read it.
Yeah. It was, I mean, I can play the audio, but I can also just send it to you.
Just send it to me.
Okay. So I've actually tweeted this out multiple times. It's a crazy clip, regardless of what your take is on Syria. It's John Kerry admitting that. Okay, here's what he said, and I'll send it to you. The Obama administration was watching ISIS grow in strength in Syria, and that they were. And then this is me paraphrasing. They were going to paraphrasing because I don't have the rest of the quote right in front of me because it's audio and I'm reading a portion of the quote right now. They thought that Russia was going to potentially stop them quicker than they did, and it ended up being that Russia had to come in and actually intervene more so in the country to try and save the country from these ISIS militants. I encourage you to listen to the clip. It's really interesting.
Okay. Can you send it to me then?
Yes.
Okay. Would you also acknowledge that the majority of ISIS defeats in Syria and the fighting that ISIS had to go through was fighting American-backed proxies?
That ISIS was fighting American-backed proxies?
Yes. The SDF had the vast majority of casualties against ISIS. They did the vast majority of attacking, and taking back ISIS's territory. They took their capital. I mean, it's undisputable.
Oh my God, I didn't know that. I would say that it's directly relevant to U.S. backing of these extremist groups, which also had other ulterior motives that do not align with protecting Syrian sovereignty.
Okay. So this is a link. Wait. This is a link to your tweet.
I'd be remiss to point out if, Russia in the Syrian forces and the PMF also didn't suffer many casualties in fighting against ISIS.
Oh, of course. The PMFs definitely fought ISIS, even though the PMFs were mostly in Iraq. We're talking more about Syria at the moment. The majority of fighting against ISIS was done by the SDF. So if the idea was ISIS is going to depose Bashar al-Assad and we're going to have and that's going to do all that work, why did we fight ISIS the most in Syria?
Because we were so John Kerry in that clip I just sent you.
Yes, could you send me the original source and not one of your tweets, please?
I mean, that is the original source. You can hear his voice in there.
If your tweet's the original source, I just want to know where you got this from.
Listen to. I got it from. I think I got it from a YouTube video. It may have been. Do you know who the New Atlas is? I think it may have been one of his videos actually. But this is. I mean, it's John Kerry's voice. No one has ever disputed that. Okay,
because I just like original sources. Because they didn't want a Daesh government and they supported Assad. And we know that was growing. We were watching. We saw the Daesh was growing in strength, and we thought Assad was threatened. We thought, however, we could probably manage, that Assad might then negotiate. Instead of negotiating, you've got Assad and you've got Putin supporting him. Yes. Okay. So you're saying that the United States could have jumped in and got involved to fight ISIS, right? But didn't because we wanted ISIS to depose Assad, right? That's what you're alleging that John Kerry said, correct?
So that was during a different period in which it was isolated from when we were backing the proxies that were the extremist proxies that were fighting against ISIS and trying to destabilize. But
we started Operation Inherent Resolve, the at least the groundwork for it in 2013 in the Battle of Kobane, when we dropped the YPG, AK-47s, ammunitions, and then eventually we got involved with airstrikes, and we even coordinated about 150 Peshmerga fighters to move in and help the what was the YPG at the time fight, and the early remnants of the YPJ, and so. That was in 2013. The uprising started in 2011, and ISIS was still gaining territory. In fact, most of the world thought Kobani was going to fall. Erdogan famously said, don't worry, no matter what the Americans would do, Kobani will fall. And then it didn't. It was an amazing show that they saw what happened in Sinjar and didn't want it to happen in Kobani. So my question would be, if that's the case, if that was the plan, it was still happening. Why did we stop it then?
Why did we stop what?
Why did we stop ISIS continue to grow in Syria? We stopped that.
Because the United States wanted to occupy certain regions in which ISIS was gaining a stronghold. We eventually realized that it would be more effective rather than letting ISIS run rampant across the country, gain more territorial control, destabilize Bashar al-Assad. We thought it would be more beneficial if we took the current approach. If we backed these proxies in the region, took over a third of the country, also took over the Idlib province, and decided to steal the resources on our own and reinvest the profits into the occupying forces.
When did John Kerry say this?
So that was before we started supporting the proxy forces.
Nope, this was in 20. This says he was speaking in September of 2016. We started Operation Inherent Resolve.
No. He was speaking in December of 2016, but he's referring to a much earlier point in the Obama administration before. That wouldn't even make any sense.
Yes.
Why would the Obama
and
administration...
all that he says here...
No, Dylan, let me finish, because that doesn't make any sense. He was speaking then, he was secretly recorded speaking then, but it wouldn't make any sense for him to be reflecting on a period that happened in the future or prior to the point in which the U.S. was providing support for these extremist groups that were fighting ISIS on the ground. That would make absolutely zero sense.
The problem with this statement is what this
There's
is
no problem. It's him saying
Let me finish. Let me finish, because you're alleging that this shows that we were just letting ISIS go free and go wild. And the reason why it was to depose Assad, even though we then took a contradictory policy immediately afterwards. I mean, 2011 to 2013, that's only 2 years. So you're saying we did a complete 180 in 2 years, right? And all this quote is saying is that the American government thought that the chaos that was ensuing in Assad's country would basically cause him to have to negotiate, that he wouldn't have any options due to rebellions, his government defecting, and ISIS, another terror group, gaining ground, which that is usually how, you know, governments fall, is that their government falls apart, the country falls apart, and then they have no option to negotiate or flee the country. And so this is John Kerry basically saying that, like, we thought that ISIS and all these terror groups were going to basically, and the rebels were going to tear across the countryside and force them to negotiate. That didn't end up happening. But literally 2 years later, we were fighting ISIS in the countryside in Operation Inherent Resolve. And so you need more evidence in this to suggest that our plan was to let like ISIS depose Assad when we just thought it was like all the governments.
I mean, you're nitpicking the statement here, so let me just read it out for you in full.
Because it's very important.
He says, this is the former Secretary of State. Yes, U.S. foreign policy absolutely makes no fucking sense. I agree. But this is exactly what he said. He said...
Yeah, it's a grand conspiracy, but it makes no sense.
No, I mean, this is what he's alleging. He's saying right here that this is what the Obama administration did. Daesh refers to ISIS. I'm sure you understand that, but I don't know if everyone in my chat and your chat does. Daesh was was threatening the possibility of going to Damascus, which we all know is like the major city in Syria, which would have been absolutely horrendous. That's why Russia came in, because they didn't want a Daesh government. And they supported Assad, and we know this was growing, referring to Daesh. We were watching. We saw that Daesh was growing in strength, and we thought Assad was threatened. And then he goes on to say, we thought, however, we could probably manage, that Assad might then negotiate. Instead of negotiating, you've got Assad and you've got Putin supporting him, meaning that the strategy, this is why they did this, because John Kerry admits that the strategy of allowing this extremist group to try and run rampant across the country...
Is his words or your words?
Okay, I'll use his words, Dylan. Grow in strength, and was willing to go into Damascus. That's a pretty appropriate,
Yes.
That I would say, run rampant across the country is kind of similar to saying that. Okay? So let me finish. He acknowledged that was their preferred method of getting Assad to negotiate. Negotiate for what? Any of the things that they're currently doing. Probably. I'm speculating, but that's probably what, because the ends haven't changed, but the means have. So he said that we saw Daesh growing, they were growing in strength, and they were planning to go into Damascus, and we thought that we would be able to manage the situation by Assad negotiating with us, but that didn't happen, and Russia came in to support forces on the ground that would counter ISIS. Therefore, the U.S. had no option but to change their means, their course of action in Syria to support these extremist groups, overtake ISIS, and occupy the land, which is what they're currently doing in the Idlib province and in the northeast of Syria. Okay,
so first, there's two things I want to say here. The first thing I would say is, if this is what John Kerry said, John Kerry is not that.
It is what John Kerry said.
Now, okay, so the problem is, the first thing is I have a problem with what John Kerry said. I disagree with John Kerry. The idea that Russia...
Use the Secretary of State. Why do you disagree? You need to be more specific.
Well, I'm about to say why I disagree with John Kerry, if you let me finish my statement. Okay. So the reason I disagree is that it was proven immediately when the Russians got involved that their main goal was not to fight ISIS. They said that publicly, but what they immediately started doing was bombing rebel strongholds, right? They bombed rebel strongholds. The majority of their bombs hit rebel strongholds. So if their priority was to fight ISIS, like the Russian government said and John Kerry said, why was it that they immediately targeted the rebels, not ISIS?
When you say immediately, when are you referring to?
Like right when they get into the country and start bombing campaigns, because that's the main way that they supported them militarily.
So what were they doing before they got into the country?
They were supporting Assad through other means.
I mean, I think I misunderstood you.
Okay.
You're not alleging that the U.S. Who are you saying they?
The Russians.
Okay, so what was the U.S. doing before they started supporting these extremist groups?
Well, we were saying the protesters good. Like, what do you mean? Are you talking about before Timber Sycamore? Because Timber Sycamore, like, basically
I'm specifically referring to the point that you haven't been able to refute yet, that John Kerry said this and that he was.
Well, no, I never said he didn't say this. I just asked for the evidence.
This is the evidence. It was recorded.
Yes, and now I'm talking about the quote with you.
There's a reason why. There's a reason why there's nothing on the books about the U.S. providing direct, open pathways for ISIS to run rampant, or as you put it, as you want
what
me to
you're
put
saying
it, grow in
is,
strength and
but this
take over Damascus.
This is John Kerry.
We do have evidence of Israel, who is our close ally, providing direct support for ISIS and Daesh, and providing medical support and providing strategic support. But we also have this evidence, this audio clipping. This is evidence from the former Secretary of State claiming that prior to launching these, proxy extremist missions in the country to occupy regions of the country, which only had to have happened because Russia came in and helped Assad defend the country from ISIS. This was the preferred method, the preferred means of the U.S. empire in Syria.
Okay, so you didn't engage with anything I said. So listen to what I'm saying.
You didn't. No, you didn't.
You gotta listen if you're going
to... Tell me where I'm wrong. Tell me where John Kerry's wrong. You haven't done that.
I did. I said that if John Kerry thought that the Russians were going to get involved to then stop ISIS, why is it that when they got involved, they then fought the rebels primarily?
Who fought the rebels?
The Russians.
Because the U.S. didn't think that Russia was going to get involved.
Yes.
They thought
that's why I'm saying I disagree with John Kerry. Because he was wrong about it. He was factually wrong. He was factually wrong about the Russians.
The U.S. made an assessment. They thought that they were going to be able to get... They thought that nothing would have come out of this. They thought that it was going to be... The end was going to be that ISIS forced Assad to negotiate with the U.S. to come and provide some form or another of strategic support.
No,
that didn't happen.
No, you don't.
So
we
did it anyways, and we occupied the land.
What you just said. Now you're making more claims that are not true. You don't have... Okay, you have evidence.
You claim to be a foreign policy advisor, and you don't understand the basic tenements of what was happening in Syria.
I don't claim to be.
You don't understand what's happening in Syria.
I carried the water. I already did
what's happening.
You don't understand anything about Syria. You just come here and make claim after claim while not understanding the history of Syria.
You don't
didn't even know about the history rights. You didn't even know that Bashar al-Assad was the leader.
And you claim to be a foreign policy advisor. The person that you even claim to be an advisor for, Michaela Wilkes, she even holds differing policy viewpoints than you do on Syria.
Yes,
because
that's
you have such incredible imperialist brain rot that you don't understand that you are incredibly wrong. I know I offended you because that's like the one label that you tout around and claim as if you were someone who should be trusted with public information and public narratives. But you're actually wrong on this.
Boy needs to be saved.
You're wrong on a lot of issues. You're wrong on Taiwan. You're wrong on Syria. You're wrong on tons of issues. The U.S. does not have a just or humanitarian mission in Syria at the moment. They do not have a just mission. They're stealing Syrian oil. They're stealing Syrian wheat. And they're occupying the land. And they're backing these extremist forces. If you want to back that, you're supporting the U.S. empire backing extremist militias who have tortured civilians and are stealing Syrian oil and creating balkanized states.
And then we'll talk to him again, okay? Is he done yet? I don't know if he's done yet. He's still going. Number one, I know Michaela Wilkes doesn't disagree with me on that because she does. I wrote the press statement that she released on Syria.
She does.
I wrote the press statement.
She does. Go look at her website right now. It's different. He was a former foreign policy advisor.
And guess what? And I
It's
don't
different
agree,
now.
and I don't work for her now.
It's
so when she
different.
worked for me, she took my advice.
She chose that your statement was such brain rot that she had no other choice but to alter her position.
You know
because
that? You talked to her about that?
wrong. You are
I can call
wrong.
her. I can call her
You
right
are
now.
objectively wrong.
You know how bad it would look if I called her right now and she told me she agreed with me?
She agreed with you, but does she agree with you
I
now?
can call her. Yeah,
Does she
you want me
agree
to call
with
her
you
right now?
No,
I can call her.
I don't want to bother her, but she doesn't agree with you now.
Okay. You know what? Bother her. She's okay because she
No,
wouldn't take the time. She's a
you
very lovely
concede-
woman.
Dylan, do you
She's a
concede
very
that
lovely
she
woman.
doesn't agree with you now?
I don't care.
That's because
But let me
she
talk to her.
doesn't
Because the
agree
thing is,
with
I don't
you
even
now.
know.
She
And
has
who
a
cares?
different opinion on this because
she got
you
a
have
worse
such
opinion.
an imperialist take.
That's not
and
even
Michaela
true.
Wilkes is
Oh
a
my
true
God.
anti-imperialist.
Why would this
She is a
this
true
doesn't even matter.
anti-imperialist. She
This
does
doesn't
not
matter.
support U.S. warmongering or psyop operations in
doesn't
Syria.
matter.
She is a true
This doesn't
anti-imperialist,
matter.
and she doesn't
This
agree with your
doesn't-
dog
okay,
shit
I'm gonna
opinion
call
on
her.
Syria.
Let's
She
call her
doesn't
right
agree with
now.
your opinion on
You're
Syria.
gonna look. I can call her right now.
She does not agree with your current
You
opinion
don't want
on
me to
Syria.
call her. Why don't you want me to call her?
She doesn't agree with your current opinion on Syria.
Want me to call her and I can ask her.
I can look at her own website. I've done it.
Okay. Well, you have a nice day. It's way past the 2-hour
I
mark for
accept
me.
your
I gave
defeat.
you an extra 12 minutes.
You fucking
What do you mean?
imperialist shitlib. I accept your defeat.
Wait, can I ask you one last question?
Infrared is rising.
Okay,
Tankies
let me
are
ask you,
rising.
why are you funded by
Communists are
pro-Assad
rising,
lobby groups? Why are you funded by
Anti-imperialists are
pro-Assad
rising.
lobby groups?
Marxist
You're funded by
Leninists are
pro-Assad
rising.
lobby groups.
These
You
shitlibs are falling.
accepted an
The
award named
imperialist
after
shitlibs are
anti-Semites.
falling.
Named after
Imperialists
anti-Semites.
are falling.
You accepted an
The
award
The
made by anti-Semites.
anti-imperialists are
Made by
rising.
anti-Semites, and you
Infrared is
accepted it.
rising.
You are funded
You
by pro-Assad lobby groups. You
RedTube,
accepted
the
their money.
imperialists
You
are
accepted
falling
their, you
to
accepted
record
their
lows.
award.
One in the chat.
You
if
accepted
tankies are
funding.
rising. One in
You
the
are
chat.
so
if
fucking
tankies
stupid.
are rising.
Why
I
are
see
you so
only ones in the
stupid?
chat.
Wow,
Only
look
ones
at your
in the
chat.
chat.
Your chat
Only
agrees
ones in the
with you.
chat. Tankies are rising.
Okay,
RedTube imperialist
chat,
shitlibs are
Spamo
falling.
Megalov, this man
I see
needs
only
Jesus.
ones in the chat.
Spamo Megalov,
I
he
see
needs
only
Jesus,
ones
okay?
in the chat. I
He
see
needs,
only
he
ones
needs
in the
Jesus
chat.
Christ.
Only ones in the chat.
Look at him.
I see
All of them
only
thinking
ones in the
Jesus.
chat.
I'll
I
convert
see
you.
only ones in
I
the
know a
chat.
pastor who
I
can
see
convert you
only
and
ones
bring
in
you
the
to
chat.
God,
I
which
see
you
only
most
ones in the
certainly
chat.
need.
I
Jesus,
see only
amen.
ones in the chat.
Save this boy
Tankies are
from
rising.
his damnation.
Infrared is
from his
rising.
damnation.
Infrared is
from
rising.
his damnation. Oh, amen. Jesus Christ,
All right,
save
Dylan.
this boy from his damnation. Save him from his ways, from his pro-Assad lobby group money taken as he takes awards from anti-Semitic
Thank
awards.
you for all the follows.
Oh boy, he loves
Thank
it.
you for the
He loves
subscribes.
that pro-Assad.
Thank you for the follows.
Pro-Assad lobby group.
I'm so
But
glad
why
you
do
guys
take
are all
that Assad
leaving
money?
the
Why'd you take the
imperialist
Assad
audience
money?
and coming
Why'd you take
to the
the Assad
left.
money?
I'm
Why'd you take
so
the Assad
glad
money?
that
Why did
we
you
are
take the Assad
winning.
money?
I'm
Why did you
so
take the Assad
glad
money?
that we are
Why did you
winning
take the
the
Assad money?
information
Why'd you take
war.
the Assad money?
I'm so
Why'd you take the
glad
Assad money?
that we
Why'd you
are
take the Assad
winning
money?
this
Why'd you take
information
the
war
Assad money?
against the
Why'd you take the
imperialists.
Assad money?
I'm
Why'd you
so
take the Assad
glad.
money? Why'd you take the
Infrared
Assad
is
money?
rising.
Why'd you take the
Tankies
Assad
are
money? Why'd
rising.
you accept the award from an award
And we
funded
are
by
winning.
pro-Assad lobby groups,
Dylan.
and it's named after a journalist.
Dylan, I accept his defeat. He's muted at the moment. I accept his defeat kindly. He's got white dribble coming out of his lip right now. Look at that. Do you see the white dribble coming out of his lip right now? He's yelling so incessantly that he literally has white dribble coming out of his fucking lip because he has lost it. Folks, the anti-imperialists are winning. The tankies are rising. Infrared is rising. The Marxist-Leninists are rising. And it is the most beautiful thing I think I've ever seen. I'm so excited for what the future holds for all of us. And look at this kid. Do you really want to associate with someone like this? He got so mad when I brought up Michaela Wilkes. He got so mad when I brought that up because she doesn't agree with his Syria policy anymore. He got so mad about that. He got so mad about that. He's malding, yes. This is what happens when you get challenged by a true anti-imperialist, right? This is what happens when you get challenged by a true anti-imperialist. Is this who you want on your side? This is not who you want on your side. This is the face of a hateful, bigoted imperialist who supports U.S. exceptionalism and wants to wage war across the world and all of its people, all of its oppressed people. Yet we here, we want nothing more than to stand up for human rights, decency, in a new multipolar system on this planet. That's all we want. That's all we want. We want peace. This community is a peace-loving community. That's all we want. All we want is peace. Tankies are rising. He had white dribble coming from out of his lip. I want to see ones in the chat if you think I fucking absolutely obliterated that debate. I want to see ones in the chat. This is our moment, folks. This is our moment. There's nothing just about war. There's nothing just about intervention. There's nothing just about creating balkanized nations in Syria, in Taiwan, in Niger, in Somalia, in any Latin American country, Bolivia, Peru, Chile. In Chile right now, the number one candidate is a communist candidate. Why? Because communism is rising. Marxist-Leninist ideology is rising. There's a reason why. There is a reason why texts such as the Communist Manifesto have lasted throughout the ages. There's a reason why state and revolution has lasted throughout the ages. And there is a reason why imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism, has been able to stand against the test of time and combat all odds, all shit-libs, all imperialists, and reign supreme. It's because we are winning. It's because we are rising. It's because shit-libs like Dylanburns and Vaush and all of those other fucks, Hassan Piker, have no ground to stand on. The anti-imperialists will win. We are entering a new dawn, a new age, a new day. And they are crumbling from within. I showed you on the stream earlier that bread tube is eating itself alive. They are crumbling from within. They are countering their own narratives, and they are coming to the Marxist, Leninist, anti-imperialist, and patriotic left. Nothing can stop us. Nothing can stop us. This is my first week on Twitch, kind of. And we are already proving that we are unstoppable. I want to ask Dylan, how many viewers did you have during your first week on Twitch? We're getting close to 300 members. 300 members. On YouTube, we have 1,000. The tankies are rising. And we must win.